In the vast silence of the Sahara, beneath dunes that whisper of forgotten kingdoms, lie traces of a history the world has barely begun to understand. Monoliths carved with unknown symbols, cities swallowed by time, and stories passed in hushed tones through generations. These are not relics of myth, but remnants of civilizations that once thrived across a continent long overlooked in the chronicles of ancient wonder. How did the builders of Great Zimbabwe lift stone walls without mortar, aligning them with celestial patterns? Who were the mysterious black pharaohs of Nubia before Egypt rose to glory? And what secrets lie beneath the sands of Niger? Africa's ancient past is not silent. It has simply been unheard. Tonight, we follow the trails of ancient knowledge, sacred rituals, lost cities, and strange artifacts that challenge everything we think we know about early human history. This is not a story of conquest. It's a story of rediscovery. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the shadows of time. And no, we won't be exploring ancient Egypt today. We've covered that in many other videos you can check out anytime. This journey takes us far beyond the Nile. In the heart of northern Africa lies a sea of sand, stretching endlessly beneath a burning sun. The Sahara, dry, silent, and formidable, is the largest hot desert in the world. Its dunes ripple like frozen waves shaped by wind and time, concealing a past that defies what we thought we knew. For most, it is a place of emptiness. But under its golden surface, whispers of an ancient civilization stir, a forgotten chapter in humanity's story, buried beneath centuries of sand and silence. Satellite imagery taken in recent decades has revealed unusual formations beneath the Sahara's vast expanse. Geometric shapes, straight lines, and circular patterns that resemble the remnants of man-made structures. These are not natural features. They seem to suggest the presence of roads, walls, perhaps even urban layouts, now hidden by thousands of years of shifting dunes. And then there are the fossils. In areas like the Fezzan Basin of Libya and the Tenere Desert of Niger, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of a green Sahara, lakes, rivers, and grasslands teeming with life. Once, around 10,000 years ago, this desert was not a desert at all. It was a thriving savanna, lush and alive. It hosted herds of animals, dense vegetation, and, most importantly, people. We know that the so-called African humid period lasted from about 10,000 BC to 3000 BC. During this time, humans flourished in what is now one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Rock art found deep in the Sahara, in places like Tassili Niger in Algeria, depict scenes of daily life: cattle grazing, people swimming, ritual dances, and complex hunting techniques. These are not primitive stick figures. They show detail, emotion, and culture. But here's the mystery. The people who created this art, where did they come from? And where did they go? As the climate began to change and the rains retreated, these fertile lands slowly turned to dust. But climate alone does not erase entire civilizations. It displaces them. And yet, much of what once existed in this vast territory seems to have vanished without a trace. Some researchers suggest that these early Saharan societies migrated southward, blending into what would become the cultures of the Sahel and sub-Saharan Africa. Others believe that fragments of their knowledge lived on in oral traditions, passed down through millennia. But more intriguing are the theories that suggest something was lost, something much more advanced than we've been led to believe. Could it be that the Sahara once housed a proto-civilization, parallel to or even predating Mesopotamia? Could it have been a cradle of early science, spirituality, or architecture? One that left behind more than myths? Recent excavations at sites like Nabta Playa near the Egyptian-Sudanese border suggest this is not beyond the realm of possibility. Here, megalithic stone circles, predating Stonehenge by nearly 1,000 years, align with astronomical events. They hint at a sophisticated understanding of the stars long before written language emerged. Yet Nabta Playa is just one of many enigmatic locations. Further west, near the Richat structure in Mauritania, known as the Eye of the Sahara, speculation deepens. Some fringe theorists have proposed that this circular geological formation might be the ruins of Atlantis itself, echoing Plato's description of a concentric ringed city lost to time. While mainstream scholars dismiss this as coincidence, the structure's visibility from space and its unusual symmetry continue to draw curiosity. What's compelling is not the Atlantis theory per se, but the broader implication that we are only beginning to grasp the depth of ancient human presence beneath the desert. Geologists have confirmed the presence of ancient river systems, invisible to the naked eye but visible via radar scanning, proof that entire landscapes once flourished here, now completely erased from the surface. If these rivers once fed cities, villages, or temples, where are their remains? Could entire settlements now lie buried under meters of sand, waiting to be uncovered? The challenge is monumental. Excavation in such harsh, remote regions is costly and dangerous. Shifting sands can consume evidence faster than it can be studied. And yet, a growing number of archaeologists are convinced that the Sahara still guards treasures of untold historical value. In 2000, a team led by archaeologist Paul Sereno discovered a 10,000-year-old cemetery at Gobero in Niger. What they found was astonishing. Skeletons of men, women, and children buried with care, surrounded by artifacts, pottery, jewelry, tools, evidence of a society that lived, thrived, and died long before the Sahara became what it is today. These were not nomads scraping out a living. They were part of a settled culture with time for ritual, for art, and for remembrance. So what happened to them? Was it only the slow advance of aridity that erased their memory? Or were there deeper, more complex shifts, cultural, political, or even catastrophic, that led to the fall of a civilization we have yet to rediscover? Perhaps the sand has hidden more than ruins. Perhaps it has hidden knowledge, ways of living, surviving, and understanding the world that we have lost. And if this ancient civilization did once exist, scattered across what is now a desolate expanse, how might it change our understanding of Africa's place in early human history? Could it shift the timeline of civilization itself? We may never know the full story, but the desert remembers. And somewhere, beneath the dunes, the past still breathes. So let us continue our search, not with maps and machines alone, but with open minds and quiet reverence for the forgotten. The Sahara may be silent, but its silence is not empty. It is waiting to be heard. As we leave behind the buried echoes of a lost Sahara, where ancient lakes once cradled forgotten civilizations, we shift our gaze toward the arid cliffs and winding plateaus of Mali's Bandiagara Escarpment. Here, in the ochre hills and stone-carved dwellings of the Dogon people, a different kind of mystery emerges, not of ruins or lost cities, but of knowledge. Knowledge written not in stone, but in stars. The Bandiagara region is striking in its raw beauty. High sandstone cliffs rise abruptly from the Sahel plain, carved by time and weather into towering ridges and caves. For centuries, the Dogon have made their homes here. Villages of mud brick houses nestled into the rocky slopes, granaries raised on stilts, and sanctuaries adorned with symbolic art and masks representing the spiritual world. Theirs is a culture of oral tradition, cosmology, and ancestral reverence. But beneath the surface of these rich cultural practices lies a question that has captivated researchers for decades. How did the Dogon come to know about Sirius B? The Dogon speak of Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky, not as one, but as two. According to their oral tradition, Sirius has a companion star, Po Tolo, invisible to the naked eye and incredibly dense. They describe its orbit around Sirius A, claim it completes this orbit in about 50 years, and speak of it as the smallest and heaviest of all stars. Astronomers in the West only confirmed the existence of Sirius B in 1862, when it was first observed through a telescope. Its extraordinary density wasn't fully understood until the 20th century, long after the Dogon were already speaking about it in their rituals and myths. This has led to one of the most persistent enigmas in the history of anthropology. The Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B was first brought to global attention in the 1930s by French anthropologists Marcel Griaule and Germain Dieterlen. After years of close work with Dogon elders, they documented cosmological beliefs that appeared remarkably aligned with modern astrophysical knowledge supposedly unknown to any human culture without the aid of advanced telescopes. But how? Skeptics argue that the Dogon may have absorbed modern astronomical concepts through contact with Western travelers before Griaule's arrival. Others suggest miscommunication, flawed interpretation, or even projection by the anthropologists themselves. Oral traditions, after all, are fluid, subject to change, embellishment, or unintentional influence. Could a single conversation with a European missionary or trader have introduced this knowledge, later integrated seamlessly into Dogon cosmology? Yet the depth and consistency of the Dogon's Sirius tradition seem to resist such easy explanations. Their cosmology is complex and interconnected. The star Po Tolo is said to be composed of a substance so heavy and small it defies visibility, eerily close to what we now know about white dwarfs. The Dogon also describe a third star in the system, Emma Yatolo, which remains unconfirmed by modern astronomy, though some scientists speculate the possibility of a Sirius C. They speak of spiral motion, twin spirals symbolizing the orbit, and cycles measured not by seasons but by celestial rhythm. Is this the result of ancient astronomical observation lost to time? Could the Dogon have inherited knowledge passed down through forgotten migrations, perhaps from regions where ancient stargazing traditions flourished? Or does it hint at something even more elusive? Perhaps an advanced prehistoric culture whose knowledge left echoes in scattered civilizations? Then there is the more speculative and often controversial theory that the Dogon were given this information by beings not of this world. Some have pointed to the Namo, aquatic ancestral spirits described in Dogon mythology as descending from the sky in a great vessel that spun and landed with fire and thunder. To some, this sounds suspiciously like an ancient description of a spacecraft. But to the Dogon themselves, the Namo are not aliens. They are sacred. They are order bringers, teachers of balance and wisdom. Still, the coincidence is difficult to ignore. If the Dogon were isolated for centuries in their plateau settlements, how could they have known details about a star only visible through high-powered modern telescopes? The mystery deepens when one considers that the Dogon are not unique in their skyward knowledge. Across Africa, ancient cultures aligned their monuments to stars, tracked the movements of Venus, mapped lunar cycles with astonishing precision. From the megalithic site of Nabta Playa in Egypt to the stone circles of Senegal and Gambia, patterns of celestial alignment persist. Perhaps the Dogon are a remnant of something older, a worldview where stars were not just objects in the sky, but guiding forces, deeply woven into ritual, myth, and life itself. As researchers continue to study Dogon cosmology, new layers unfold. Symbols once dismissed as myth are now reconsidered. Stories once thought to be allegory are examined with fresh eyes. Is it possible that we are only beginning to understand how ancient cultures observed and recorded the cosmos? Not with telescopes, but with time, patience, and a profoundly different relationship to the sky? Or is there something deeper here, something waiting just beyond the reach of current science? The Dogon still perform their sacred rituals. Their knowledge is not locked in books, but in dances, in stories, in patterns carved into wooden masks and painted on sacred walls. For them, the stars are not remote. They are ancestral, alive, and deeply connected to the rhythms of the earth. And so, the question remains, did the Dogon discover Sirius B through cultural transmission, through lost ancient science, or through something that challenges our very understanding of history? We may never find a single answer, but in the soft winds over the Bandiagara cliffs, in the chants of the elders under a starlit sky, the mystery lingers. As the echo of the Dogon's starlit knowledge fades into the night sky, we turn our attention westward, toward the forests and river valleys of Senegal and the Gambia, where another silent enigma rises from the earth. Here, scattered across the green landscape like forgotten sentinels, stand thousands of ancient stones, upright, weathered, unmoving. They form circles, lines, and sacred patterns whose meanings are still cloaked in time. This is the mystery of the stone circles of Senegambia. The air is still in the early morning light, heavy with moisture and the sound of rustling leaves. From above, the landscape appears almost untouched. Rolling fields, scattered trees, narrow riverbanks winding toward the Atlantic. But hidden among the grass and shade are dark pillars of laterite stone, arranged with a precision that hints at purpose. Some stand alone. Others form perfect circles, sometimes with central monoliths marking a focal point. The stones themselves vary in size, but many rise as high as 2 meters. Some weigh several tons. Altogether, over 1,000 stone circles have been documented across more than 100 different locations, forming what is believed to be the largest concentration of megalithic structures in all of Africa. They span an area nearly 100 kilometers wide and stretch deep into antiquity. But who built them? And why? Mainstream archaeology dates the Senegambian stone circles to between 700 BC and 1350 AD, though some oral traditions suggest they may be older. Radiocarbon dating of burial mounds and charcoal remnants suggests they were created gradually, by complex societies with organized leadership, spiritual beliefs, and sophisticated knowledge of stonework. Indeed, many of these circles are directly associated with burial sites. Excavations have revealed human remains, pottery, iron tools, and beads. Some believe the circles were ceremonial spaces for honoring the dead, marking elite tombs, possibly even forming a kind of sacred necropolis. But the sheer number of them, and the consistency in their form and placement, raises deeper questions. Why circles? Why here? Why so many? The stones were not quarried randomly. They were carefully shaped from laterite, a reddish iron-rich rock found in the region. Quarry sites located nearby show signs of deliberate cutting and smoothing, indicating considerable labor and planning. Transporting and erecting these heavy stones would have required not only strength, but coordination, a sign of a society with time, stability, and shared belief. Yet despite all this, we still don't know the name of the people who created them. No written records survive. Oral histories passed through generations speak of ancestral builders, but offer few clear details. Some local legends claim the stones were placed by giants or spirits. Others say they were created by early kings and chiefs to protect their communities from enemies, or to mark where powerful ancestors were laid to rest. And then there is the question of alignment. Some researchers have noticed that the positioning of certain circles seems too deliberate to be random. Could the stones have astronomical significance? Might they have marked solstices, lunar cycles, or constellations? A few circles appear to be aligned with cardinal directions or seasonal points. While no consensus exists, the theory lingers that these megaliths were not only for the dead, but for the sky. And if so, what did the builders see in the heavens that they felt compelled to anchor in stone? Others look to the symbolic power of the circle itself, an ancient shape of eternity, unity, the endless rhythm of life and death. Across cultures and continents, circular forms have been used to mark sacred space. Could the builders of Senegambia have been tapping into this same universal language? A language written not in words, but in geometry? Still, a deeper mystery remains. Why was such monumental construction suddenly abandoned? By the 14th century, the building of new circles had stopped. The reasons are unclear. Some speculate environmental changes, the collapse of regional trade, or shifts in spiritual practices. Others point to the arrival of Islam, which may have disrupted earlier cosmologies and burial customs. And yet the stones remain. Unmoved, weathered by wind and rain, but still standing, watching silently over the land. Today, the Senegambian stone circles are recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected and studied by archaeologists and local communities alike. But even with scientific tools and modern theory, much of their meaning eludes us. Were they temples, graves, calendars, or all of these at once? Perhaps they were not meant to be understood in fragments, but as part of a much larger whole, a worldview now lost to time. And perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in the stones themselves, but in the minds of those who placed them. Who were they, these forgotten architects of stone? What did they believe? What did they fear, or hope, or dream? Somewhere between history and legend, between earth and sky, their legacy endures, unanswered, unfinished, still waiting to be remembered. As we leave behind the ancient stones of Senegambia, mute witnesses to a forgotten order, we travel southward across savannas brushed by golden light, toward the confluence of the Limpopo and Shashi rivers. Here, where the borders of present-day South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Botswana converge, a lonely sandstone hill rises from the plain. Weathered by centuries of wind, it holds the traces of a kingdom lost to time. This is Mapungubwe, the first known kingdom of southern Africa, and one of its most enduring mysteries. The hill itself, known as Mapungubwe Hill, is not particularly tall. From afar, it seems ordinary, an outcrop of rock, half hidden by acacia trees and low grass. But step closer, and the land begins to whisper. Beneath your feet lie the remains of royal courts, elite burials, and trade networks that once stretched across continents. 1,000 years ago, this was the seat of power for a thriving, complex society. One that controlled the flow of gold, ivory, and other precious goods across vast distances. Mapungubwe rose to prominence around 1075 AD and flourished for nearly 2 centuries before mysteriously vanishing from historical memory. What makes this kingdom so remarkable is not only its sophistication, but its silence. For decades, its story was buried, both literally and politically. Archaeologists first uncovered Mapungubwe in the 1930s, revealing the remains of palaces, stone walls, and tombs high atop the hill. Among the artifacts was a small yet radiant object, a golden rhinoceros, delicately shaped and gleaming in the sun. No larger than a forearm, this sculpture has become the most iconic symbol of Mapungubwe. It was found buried with a ruler, suggesting the presence of a divine kingship, a class hierarchy, and a rich spiritual tradition. But it wasn't just gold that made Mapungubwe extraordinary. Glass beads traced to India and the Middle East were also found at the site. Chinese porcelain, Persian ceramics. How had these objects arrived here, hundreds of years before European colonization? The answer seems to lie in trade. Mapungubwe was part of a vast inland network that fed into the Swahili coast, linking Africa to the Indian Ocean world. Its people exported gold, ivory, and animal skins, and in return received luxuries from distant lands. This was not an isolated tribe. It was an organized state with wealth, diplomacy, and long-distance vision. And yet, we know so little about the people themselves. No written records survive, no names of kings, no epic chronicles. Only fragments, potsherds, ornaments, burial sites, telling a story in silence. Oral traditions in the region speak of ancient peoples who ruled with wisdom and power, who lived on sacred hills and disappeared when balance was lost. But even these accounts are sparse, shaped by centuries of change. Why did Mapungubwe fall? Some historians point to climate shifts. Around 1300 AD, southern Africa experienced a period of prolonged drought, which may have made agriculture and settlement increasingly difficult. Others suggest that the kingdom's power was eclipsed by the rise of Great Zimbabwe to the north, which absorbed trade routes and political influence. And yet, no war, disaster, or collapse has been clearly identified in the archaeological record. The kingdom simply faded. But deeper questions remain. Why did the rulers of Mapungubwe separate themselves from their people by choosing to live atop the steep and difficult hill? What was the significance of this elevation? Spiritual, symbolic, or strategic? And why bury gold, not as wealth to be flaunted, but as a sacred offering in the tombs of the elite? The hill was not merely a residence. It was a statement, a declaration of divine rule, of spiritual hierarchy, of separation between the mortal and the sacred. Some scholars believe the layout of Mapungubwe foreshadowed the spatial logic of Great Zimbabwe, the idea that power must ascend, quite literally, from the ground below to the heavens above. The elite lived apart from the masses. The dead were buried with gold, and the hill became both throne and tomb. Then there is the question of the golden artifacts themselves. How did the Mapungubwe artisans learn to craft with such precision? The rhinoceros, now preserved in a climate-controlled museum in Pretoria, shows detailed shaping, smooth joins, and delicate hammering. Other items found include scepters, beads, and decorative coils. These were not rough castings. They were the work of master goldsmiths. Was this knowledge developed locally, or was it inherited from an earlier culture we have yet to discover? Some fringe theorists have speculated about lost civilizations, Atlantis-like cities hidden beneath southern soil. Others draw connections to the mythical Ophir, a land of gold mentioned in biblical texts. While these ideas remain in the realm of speculation, they reflect a deeper truth, that Mapungubwe continues to challenge our understanding of what Africa's ancient past really looked like. What other kingdoms, cities, or traditions have we yet to uncover? What lies beneath the surface, hidden not just by earth and time, but by the narratives we've chosen to forget? Mapungubwe is not a legend. It is not a myth. It was real, prosperous, advanced, and African. And yet, even with all we've learned, the silence persists. No voices remain from its royal courts. No chronicles describe its rise or fall. Only the wind through the baobab trees and the gold glinting in a museum case remind us that a great kingdom once stood here. And somewhere in the soil, it may still be waiting. As the golden echoes of Mapungubwe fade into the dust of the southern savanna, we turn northeast toward the rugged highlands of Ethiopia. Here, in the ancient city of Aksum, where obelisks rise from the earth and legends cling to every stone, one of the world's most enduring mysteries is said to rest. A sacred relic so powerful, so revered, that it has shaped history, fueled myth, and inspired quests across centuries. This is the Ark of the Covenant, and its alleged resting place may lie hidden in the heart of East Africa. Aksum is no ordinary city. Once the capital of a powerful empire that flourished from around 100 AD to 940 AD, it was a hub of trade, religion, and political influence. Its monumental stelae, some towering over 20 meters, still stand as silent guardians over a past both proud and elusive. According to tradition, this was once the home of the Queen of Sheba, and the place where her son, Menelik the brought the Ark of the Covenant after visiting his father, King Solomon of Israel. It is a tale told in the Kibra Nagast, the Ethiopian national epic compiled in the 14th century, though believed to preserve much older oral traditions. According to this text, Menelik I, born of Solomon and Sheba, traveled to Jerusalem as a young man and, upon returning to Ethiopia, brought with him the Ark, either with Solomon's blessing or through divine intervention. Since then, the story claims, the Ark has remained in Ethiopia. Today, its alleged resting place is a modest stone church in Aksum, the Church of St. Mary of Zion. Surrounded by tall stone walls and shaded by old sycamore trees, the church is unassuming, yet it draws pilgrims and curiosity seekers from around the world. A small adjacent chapel, known as the Chapel of the Tablet, is where the Ark is said to be kept, but no one may see it. Access to the chapel is strictly limited. Only a single guardian monk, appointed for life, is allowed to enter. He lives in solitude, devotes his life to prayer, and never leaves the church grounds again. He is the only soul permitted to gaze upon the sacred object, and even he, according to some accounts, does not look directly at it. What lies inside? Descriptions vary. Some claim the Ark is an ancient gold-covered chest, just as described in the Hebrew Bible, housing the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, Aaron's rod, and a pot of manna. Others believe it is a symbolic replica. Still others suggest it may not be the biblical Ark at all, but rather an ancient Ethiopian artifact associated with early Judeo-Christian rituals. And yet, for the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, there is no doubt. The Ark is real, it is sacred, and it rests in Aksum. Mainstream scholars, however, remain skeptical. The Kebra Nagast, while rich in detail, was written centuries after the events it describes. There is no archaeological evidence linking the Ark's journey to Ethiopia. No external records mention its departure from Jerusalem. According to most historical accounts, the Ark vanished from view during the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem around 587 BC. Could it have survived? Could it have been smuggled away during the chaos, passed through secret hands, and carried across deserts to the African highlands? Some researchers suggest that Jewish communities fleeing persecution may have carried sacred relics southward. Indeed, Ethiopia has a long and complex relationship with Judaism. The Beta Israel, or Ethiopian Jews, trace their heritage back thousands of years. Could the Ark, or something like it, have traveled with them? Others point to possible links between Ethiopia and ancient Egypt. Trade routes, cultural exchanges, and even military campaigns connected the Nile Valley with the Horn of Africa. Was it through these corridors that knowledge, or perhaps even possession, of the Ark passed? More speculative still are theories involving the Knights Templar, lost scrolls, and secret chambers beneath Aksum's churches, fringe ideas that ignite the imagination but remain unsupported by evidence. And yet, the silence surrounding the Ark's alleged location invites such speculation. The lack of access, the secrecy, the reverence, it all fuels a sense of awe and of mystery. Satellite images show no signs of vaults beneath the chapel. No expeditions have been allowed inside. Appeals from historians and journalists have been denied. Even high-ranking church officials defer to the authority of the guardian monk. Why such secrecy? Is it devotion? Tradition? Or is there something they're truly protecting? What cannot be denied is the power of the belief itself. For centuries, Ethiopians have centered their faith, their festivals, and their national identity around the Ark. During the festival of Timkit, replicas of the Ark, called tabots, are paraded through the streets, draped in cloth, carried with solemnity. To the faithful, the Ark is not a relic of the past. It is a living symbol of divine presence. And perhaps, in the end, that is part of its mystery. Whether the Ark in Aksum is the true biblical artifact, a revered replica, or something else entirely, it remains an object of deep reverence, carefully protected, never revealed. Its power lies not just in its supposed contents, but in what it represents, the bridge between the ancient world and the spiritual world, between legend and living memory. So we are left to wonder, could the Ark of the Covenant, lost from the pages of history, truly lie hidden beneath Ethiopian skies? Or is the truth more symbolic, woven into the culture, the faith, and the enduring silence of those sworn to guard it? In Aksum, the stones remember. The sacred is never far, and somewhere behind locked doors, perhaps, the echoes of Sinai still rest in the dark. As we leave behind the solemn chambers of Aksum and the hidden Ark believed to rest within them, we now return to the desert. But this time, not to the endless sands of the Sahara, nor to the forgotten cities swallowed by time. Instead, we journey deeper into antiquity, south of modern-day Egypt, near the border with Sudan, to a remote basin long forgotten by the world. Here, amid flat, cracked earth and windswept silence, lies a circle of stones, small, unassuming, and yet one of the oldest known astronomical alignments on Earth. This is Nabta Playa. At first glance, the site offers little to the untrained eye. Scattered stones on a barren desert floor. The wind brushes over dry sand. The sun beats down relentlessly. There are no towering monuments or grand inscriptions here. No palaces or temples. Only a quiet ring of megaliths, modest in size, forming patterns whose purpose was almost lost to time. But look closer. Some stones are carefully aligned, their orientation pointing to key positions in the sky. Others stand upright in deliberate clusters. A central circle, with radiating lines and carefully placed markers, begins to reveal its secrets. This was not a random collection of rocks. It was a calendar, a celestial map carved into the earth more than 6,000 years ago, long before Stonehenge, long before the pyramids of Giza. Nabta Playa dates to as early as 5000 BC, with some of its features potentially even older. Archaeologists believe it was once the site of a seasonal lake, a gathering place for nomadic peoples who migrated with the rains. But over time, these people did more than hunt and herd. They watched the sky. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Nabta Playa is a grouping of stones that aligns with the rising of the summer solstice sun. This alignment would have marked the beginning of the rainy season, essential knowledge for people dependent on seasonal water. Other alignments suggest connections to Orion's belt and Sirius, stars that would later play major roles in ancient Egyptian cosmology. Could Nabta Playa have served as an early blueprint for what would become one of history's most advanced civilizations? Some scholars believe so. The precision of the site's stellar alignments suggests not just casual observation, but long-term tracking, perhaps over generations. Measuring the solstice, predicting rainfall, organizing ritual. These were not merely practical observations, but spiritual ones. In many ancient cultures, the sky was a mirror of the divine. To understand the stars was to understand the will of the gods. And yet, Nabta Playa predates the rise of dynastic Egypt by over a millennium. It emerged from a pre-agricultural world, one where mobile pastoralists paused long enough to build something permanent, something meant to endure. But who were these early astronomers? Archaeological evidence reveals they were cattle herders, likely of sub-Saharan origin, who moved through the region following seasonal patterns. Their graves, scattered near the site, contain bones, beads, and pottery. One burial pit held the remains of cattle arranged with clear ritual intent, perhaps one of the earliest examples of animal worship on the continent. Some believe this reverence for cattle would echo centuries later in Egyptian religious symbolism, from Hathor to Apis. What's most haunting about Nabta Playa is not just its age, but how advanced it was for its time. The concept of marking celestial events with megaliths is usually associated with later cultures in Europe or the Near East. Yet here, in the heart of Africa, a Neolithic society had already begun to chart the heavens. Did they develop this knowledge independently? Or was there a deeper tradition, now lost, that connected early African societies across great distances? Some theorists have proposed that Nabta Playa might represent an origin point for ideas that later flowed northward into the Nile Valley, seeding the foundations of Egyptian astronomy, timekeeping, and temple orientation. Others caution against such linear narratives, reminding us that history is rarely a straight line. Still, the parallels are striking. And then, there are the more speculative ideas. Some fringe researchers have pointed to the Orion alignment as evidence of advanced astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed at the time. They ask, could the builders of Nabta Playa have possessed insights granted by visitors, either from other civilizations or beyond? While mainstream archaeology finds no need for such theories, their persistence speaks to the enduring allure of the site. After all, how did Neolithic herders, without metal tools, riding, or permanent cities, construct such an accurate astronomical device? How did they track the solstice over time? What rituals took place within the circle of stones, under the rising stars? We may never know the full answers. Much of Nabta Playa remains buried beneath sand. Excavations are limited. The desert, ever shifting, guards its secrets. And yet the stones endure, unmoved, untouched, still aligned to a sky that continues to turn. What else might lie beneath the surface? Were there other sites like Nabta Playa, now erased by erosion or simply undiscovered? Could we be looking at the last surviving trace of an early African science? One that saw the cosmos not as distant, but deeply woven into the fabric of daily life? Or was this simply a place of memory, where sky, earth, and spirit met in sacred rhythm? In the silence of the Nubian desert, Nabta Playa continues to watch the heavens. A stone circle built by forgotten hands, a message written in shadow and light, and a mystery still unfolding beneath the stars. As the sun sets over the ancient stone circle of Nabta Playa, casting long shadows across the desert floor, our journey carries us further south, beyond the Nile and the Sahel, into the verdant hills and valleys of western Tanzania. Here, in a land of deep forests and rich red soil, a different kind of mystery awaits, not carved in stone, nor aligned with stars, but forged in fire. A mystery that has puzzled scientists and historians alike. A tale of heat, skill, and forgotten mastery. This is the story of the Haya people and their astonishing command of metal. The region is serene now. Lush banana groves sway in the wind, and narrow footpaths wind through fields of cassava and maize. But buried just beneath this peaceful surface are remnants of an ancient tradition that defies conventional timelines. Charcoal-stained soil, clay furnaces, slag deposits. These are the faint signatures of a metallurgical legacy once centuries ahead of its time. In the 1970s, researchers studying the Haya people near Lake Victoria made a discovery that would send ripples through the academic world. In a series of reconstructions based on local oral traditions, they were able to reproduce a method of iron smelting using indigenous techniques. What they found was staggering. Using preheated air pumped through bellows and clay furnaces insulated with banana leaves and straw, The Haya smelters achieved temperatures exceeding around 800 degrees Celsius. That's over 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough not just to smelt iron, but to produce medium carbon steel. And they were doing this as early as 200 BC. To put this in perspective, Europe's blast furnaces capable of producing similar results didn't appear until over a millennium later. How was this possible? The local smelters had no written manuals, no modern instruments. Their knowledge was passed down orally, guarded by generations of metallurgists who considered their craft both science and ritual. Clay furnaces were built with careful attention to form and airflow. Bellows were operated in rhythmic precision. It was a system that balanced engineering with deep cultural intuition. Archaeological excavations at sites like Kataruka and Kataruka revealed remnants of these ancient furnaces, circular bases, fused slag, and thick iron bloom. Radiocarbon dating confirmed their incredible age. The process, known as preheated forced draft smelting, was long thought to be a product of industrial Europe. And yet, here it was, developed independently in the heart of Africa. The implications were enormous. For years, prevailing narratives portrayed pre-colonial Africa as technologically stagnant, a continent untouched by innovation. But the Haya furnaces told a different story, a story of indigenous ingenuity, of mastery over material, of a scientific legacy largely erased from global memory. What inspired this advancement? What pushed these early metallurgists to refine their technique to such a level of precision? Some historians suggest necessity. Iron tools were vital for clearing land, cultivating crops, and defending communities. Others point to cultural pride. Among the Haya, iron was more than a utility. It was spiritual. Smelting was accompanied by chants, taboos, and rituals. The furnace was seen almost as a living being, one that required respect, preparation, and care. And yet, even with this cultural context, questions remain. How did they discover the ideal furnace shape and wall thickness? How did they manage the balance of fuel and oxygen so precisely? Could they have inherited knowledge from an even earlier, now vanished culture? Or did they, through centuries of trial and observation, develop a science the modern world simply never thought to look for? There is no evidence of foreign influence, no signs of Persian, Arab, or European metallurgical intervention during the early periods of Haya smelting. This appears to be an entirely indigenous invention, one rooted in African soil, mind, and tradition. And yet, it went unrecognized for centuries. By the time colonial powers arrived in East Africa, the iron smelting tradition had already begun to decline. Cheap imported steel and colonial disruption weakened local practices. The furnaces were abandoned, and the knowledge faded. By the mid-20th century, only fragments of the once thriving metallurgical tradition remained, enough to reconstruct, but never fully revive. Today, the ruins of Haya smelting sites lie largely undisturbed. Few tourists visit, few history books mention them, and yet their significance remains. What does it mean that a community in western Tanzania produced steel more than 2,000 years ago? What other technologies or insights might be waiting to be rediscovered across the continent? If the Haya people preserved this knowledge through generations, quietly, without fanfare, what else might African oral traditions be safeguarding? What lost sciences? What ancient intuitions? And why has so much of this been overlooked? Perhaps the real mystery is not how the Haya learned to control fire and forge steel, but how the world forgot they ever did. Beneath the trees of Tanzania, beneath the rust-colored earth, their legacy endures. Not in monuments or pyramids, but in ashes, fragments, and memory. In the quiet breath of bellows, the spark of flame, and the silent genius of those who turned earth to metal long before history was ready to believe it. And in that silence, one can't help but wonder, how much else remains hidden as we leave behind the hidden forges of ancient Tanzania, where fire shaped steel in the hands of forgotten masters? We travel northeast, ascending into the Ethiopian highlands. Here, the air thins, the landscape hardens, and the mountains cradle one of the world's most astonishing feats of sacred architecture. At first, there is nothing to see. No towers rising into the sky. No walls or rooftops in view. And then, you look down. Cut directly into the living rock, sunken below the earth, are entire churches, monolithic, majestic, and mysterious. This is Lalibela. At over 2,500 meters above sea level, the town of Lalibela appears remote, timeless. The terrain is rough, carved by ancient rivers and layered with stone. Within this rugged land lies an astonishing network of 11 medieval churches, each one hewn from solid volcanic rock, not built but sculpted from the top down. The most iconic among them, the Church of St. George, is shaped like a perfect Greek cross, its roof level with the ground above, its walls plunging deep into the bedrock. Seen from above, it seems like a symbol drawn into the earth by a divine hand. But how were these massive structures created? According to Ethiopian tradition, the churches were commissioned in the 12th century by King Lalibela of the Zagwe dynasty after a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Determined to create a new Jerusalem in Africa, he envisioned a holy city where the faithful could walk paths of salvation without leaving their homeland. The result was an architectural wonder. 11 interconnected churches, some freestanding, others joined by narrow passageways, trenches, and hidden tunnels. Each one carved by hand, without mortar or brick, directly into the rock. Mainstream historians suggest that teams of skilled laborers, likely working with chisels, hammers, and rudimentary tools, carved the churches over several decades. The volcanic tuff in the region is relatively soft when freshly exposed, which may have aided the carving process. Still, the precision of the work is baffling. Columns, archways, windows, and relief carvings, all executed from a single piece of stone, display remarkable symmetry and craftsmanship. No scaffolding, no second chances. One mistake could ruin the entire structure. And yet, they succeeded. But this only deepens the mystery. How did artisans in the 12th century, without modern measurements or engineering technology, execute such an ambitious architectural plan? How were the designs laid out, measured, and corrected, all while working downward into solid rock? What knowledge did these builders possess that allowed them to control depth, orientation, and spatial relationships with such exacting accuracy? And perhaps more puzzling, why do some elements of the churches seem older than the reign of King Lalibela himself? Several scholars have noted that parts of the complex, especially the water channels, caves, and passageways, may predate the 12th century. Could Lalibela's workers have built atop an older sacred site, reused earlier religious or cultural foundations? And if so, who laid the groundwork? There are no written blueprints, no contemporary records describe how the churches were made. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains that divine assistance played a role. According to legend, angels worked by night, speeding up the labor of human hands. The story, rich in symbolism, speaks to the reverence the site commands, but also reflects a deeper truth. The creation of Lalibela seems almost beyond human scale. Some have drawn comparisons between Lalibela and other mysterious rock-cut sites around the world, from Petra in Jordan to Ellora in India. But unlike those, Lalibela's churches are active, living places of worship. Pilgrims still journey there. Monks chant in darkened chambers. The scent of incense still clings to the cool, damp air. These are not ruins. They are sacred structures still breathing with prayer. And then there are the whispers, quiet suggestions of influences not easily explained. Some theorists propose that Templar knowledge, or even early Christian monastic orders with Mediterranean ties, could have played a role. Others claim that the architectural forms, such as pointed arches and cruciform layouts, show distant echoes of Byzantine or Eastern Orthodox influence. Yet no historical evidence confirms these connections. Only questions remain, woven into the walls like the crosses etched into the stone. Could the builders of Lalibela have had access to lost architectural traditions? Or were they simply drawing from a uniquely Ethiopian synthesis, combining local techniques, ancient religious customs, and a spiritual vision so profound that it drove them to carve heaven into the earth? Even the orientation of the churches offers intrigue. Some align with solar and lunar positions, others are arranged to echo the layout of Jerusalem itself. The subterranean walkways may symbolize the path of death and rebirth, darkness into light. The trenches, deep and narrow, feel less like corridors and more like rites of passage. This is not architecture for convenience. It is architecture as theology, stone as scripture. And yet, for all its beauty, for all its devotion, the site raises questions that have yet to be answered. What tools were truly used? How long did it take? Were there blueprints passed down through oral tradition? Or was there something more, something we've yet to uncover? In the cool, shadowed interiors of Lalibela's churches, light filters through small carved windows. It catches on stone altars, bounces across ancient murals, and fades into the darkness beyond. It is a place that feels suspended between earth and heaven. Tangible and yet unreachable. Grounded yet transcendent. A place carved not just from rock, but from mystery. And still, it stands. Waiting, whispering, enduring. As the sacred silence of Lalibela's sunken churches fades behind us, carved into stone, wrapped in mystery, we journey west, into the heart of West Africa. The land changes here. Lush savannas stretch beneath wide skies. The air grows thick with heat and the scent of earth. In central Nigeria, beneath layers of laterite soil and the roots of ancient trees, lies a civilization long forgotten, then rediscovered by accident. A culture with no known beginning and a sudden, unexplained mastery of one of humanity's most enduring art forms. This is the enigma of the Nok civilization. It began in 1928, when tin miners near the village of Nok uncovered something unexpected. A fragment of terracotta, a head, broken but expressive, almond-shaped eyes, flared nostrils, a delicate, almost meditative expression frozen in clay. Over the following decades, more pieces surfaced. Full statues, torsos, elaborate hairstyles, seated figures, warriors, animals, all rendered with remarkable sophistication. Stylized, yes, but far from primitive. The Nok artists clearly understood proportion, emotion, and form. But here lies the mystery. These artworks date back as far as 1500 BC, at a time when iron tools were just beginning to appear in the region, and long before any known centralized kingdoms in West Africa. The Nok people were already producing highly advanced sculptures, unlike anything else found on the continent at that time. Who were they? To this day, no one knows exactly where the Nok came from, or where they went. They left behind no written language, no known cities, no monuments, no palaces. Only their terracotta figures remain, buried in silence, scattered in fragments, and whispering of a culture lost. Archaeological research suggests the Nok may have been one of sub-Saharan Africa's earliest complex societies. They cultivated crops, raised livestock, and may have engaged in long-distance trade. There is evidence they understood iron smelting, perhaps among the earliest in West Africa. And yet, The full extent of their technology, social structure, and belief systems remains unclear. How did a culture capable of such artistic finesse and metallurgical skill emerge so suddenly? Some historians propose that the Nok evolved gradually from earlier Neolithic cultures in the region. Others suggest migration played a role, that groups from the north or northeast may have carried knowledge across the Sahara, mingling with local traditions to form something entirely new. But no conclusive evidence has ever been found. The terracottas themselves raise more questions than answers. Many of the figures feature exaggerated eyes and intricate hair or headdress designs. Some wear adornments that hint at rank or ceremonial roles. Others hold objects, musical instruments, weapons, or symbolic items whose meaning is lost to time. Were these sculptures representations of ancestors, deities, kings, actors in ritual dramas? We cannot say for certain. And then, as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanished. Around 300 AD, the Nok civilization seems to have faded away. Their art ceased. Their traces disappeared. There are no known records of conquest or natural disaster, no obvious signs of decline. Some scholars theorize that environmental shifts, soil degradation, drought, or overexploitation of resources may have led to gradual abandonment. Others suggest internal upheaval or migration. Still, no definitive explanation exists. What adds to the intrigue is how isolated the Nok seem to be. Their art shares no direct stylistic connection with neighboring regions of the time. It is unique, self-contained. Later West African cultures, such as If and Benin, would also produce magnificent sculpture, but centuries after the Nok had vanished, and with very different aesthetics. Is it possible that the Nok legacy lived on in oral traditions, passed down and reshaped by later civilizations? Could their influence have survived in unrecognized ways, hidden in ritual, language, or craft? Or was their knowledge lost entirely, buried beneath centuries of silence? Some more speculative theories suggest external influence. Could the Nok have had contact with Mediterranean or Nile Valley cultures through trans-Saharan routes? Could their techniques have come from distant travelers or merchants? While no clear evidence supports these ideas, the sheer uniqueness and early emergence of Nok artistry continues to invite such questions. And there is still so much we do not know, not only about the Nok themselves, but about the land that holds their memory. Looting, erosion, and limited archaeological resources have left much of the Nok world unexplored. Many sculptures were taken from the earth and sold on international art markets before they could be properly studied, separating context from artifact. Entire sites may have been destroyed before their secrets were ever recorded. Yet even in exile, these terracotta figures speak. Their eyes stare across millennia with a calm, knowing presence. Their gestures, their features, their posture all suggest a people who saw art as more than decoration. These were symbols of identity, of spirit, of something sacred. What inspired such creativity? What worldview gave rise to these forms? Beneath the soil of Nigeria, and within the hollowed gaze of a terracotta face, the Nok civilization still waits, waiting to be understood, waiting to be remembered, and perhaps waiting to reveal a forgotten chapter of Africa's ancient past. From the terracotta gazes of Nok, silent and timeless beneath the Nigerian soil, we drift once more toward the east, toward the Red Sea winds and the whispered echoes of a land lost not to time, but to direction. A place once celebrated by pharaohs, traded with across deserts and oceans, revered as a source of sacred goods and strange beasts. A land known to ancient Egyptians as Ta-Netjer, the land of the god. Its name was Punt. Its story remains, but its location has disappeared. The first records of Punt appear over 4,000 years ago, etched into temple walls in the language of kings. Egyptian scribes wrote of its riches: gold, ivory, obsidian, aromatic resins, exotic animals. Myrrh trees so sacred that Queen Hatshepsut ordered entire groves to be transplanted to the temples of Karnak. Inscriptions describe voyages to Punt as divine missions, sanctioned by the gods themselves. But where was this land? The depictions carved into stone are vivid. Scenes from Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari show towering incense trees being carried in baskets, Egyptian ships gliding toward a hilly shore, foreign peoples with distinct features and ornate dress greeting them at the harbor. Strange houses on stilts, palm trees swaying, giraffes and baboons in the background. The imagery is rich in detail, and yet curiously vague in geography. Unlike many ancient trade routes carefully chronicled in Egyptian texts, Punt's coordinates were never recorded. No latitude, no landmarks, no clear directional markers. Just one word: Punt. A name that feels more like a dream than a destination. So where did these ships sail? Scholars have long debated Punt's location. Some place it in modern-day Eritrea or eastern Sudan along the Red Sea coast. Others argue for Somalia, Djibouti, or the southern Arabian Peninsula. A few suggest it stretched deeper inland, near Ethiopia's highlands. Each theory draws from different fragments, climatic evidence, DNA studies on mummified baboons, and the types of goods recorded. In 2010, researchers traced oxygen isotope signatures in ancient baboon remains found in Egypt, comparing them to modern populations. Their findings suggested that the animals, baboons gifted by Punt, likely originated in the region of modern-day Eritrea or eastern Ethiopia. A remarkable discovery, narrowing the map, but still leaving the boundaries of Punt elusive. Could Punt have been more than one place? A shifting trade network, not a single city-state? Was it a loose federation of coastal ports and inland markets, a broader region known by a single name? And if it was so important to Egypt, so sacred, so frequented, why did it vanish from maps, from texts, from time? Some historians propose that climate change may have played a role. Shifting monsoons, drying rivers, or rising political instability could have severed trade routes, isolating Punt from the Nile Valley. Others suggest that as Egyptian priorities changed, from trade with the Levant and the Mediterranean to internal political struggles, Punt simply faded from memory, its name surviving only as a legend etched in stone. But more speculative voices have emerged. Some have linked Punt to the lost civilization of the Queen of Sheba. Others have suggested it may have overlapped with or even predated ancient Axum. A few fringe theorists propose even more radical ideas, that Punt was not a fixed location, but a symbolic reference to a divine or mythical homeland, a spiritual mirror to Egypt's own cosmology, tied to the gods, to origins, to the sacred southern lands. It's worth noting that the Egyptians referred to Punt not just as a trading partner, but with language steeped in reverence. It was not simply rich or foreign, it was divine. The land of incense and gold, yes, but also of life-giving essence, a place closer to the gods. Could this language have been more than poetic? Could the Egyptians have viewed Punt as a kind of spiritual source, a cradle of something older than dynasties, older even than temples? And if so, what happened to it? No ruins definitively tied to Punt have ever been found. No temples, no cities, no cemeteries marked with its name. Only goods, precious cargoes delivered to Egypt, and memories chiseled into tomb walls. It is a civilization known by its exports, not by its voice. Perhaps Punt was never meant to be found. Perhaps it exists not as a point on a map, but as a riddle within history, hinting at ancient ties between Africa's great civilizations that predate our understanding. Or perhaps, beneath the soils of Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Somalia, remnants still sleep, waiting to be unearthed. The ruins of port towns, the docks where Pharaoh's ships once moored, the markets where myrrh was weighed like gold. Until then, Punt remains a name out of legend, a land glimpsed in carvings, scented in temple incense, and vanished from the face of the earth. Its silence is profound, not forgotten but hidden, and in that silence we are left to wonder. Was Punt simply a place, or was it something more, something still waiting to be rediscovered? As the mystery of Punt fades into the mists of memory, a sacred land without a map, a name without a place, we now turn our gaze southward. To the highlands of South Africa, where grasslands stretch wide and rivers cut through time-worn hills. Here, buried in the soil near the town of Lydenburg, a set of ancient objects lay undisturbed for more than a millennium. Clay. Hollow. Human-like. Watching. These are the Lydenburg heads, among the oldest known ceramic sculptures in southern Africa, and among the most enigmatic. Discovered by a child in the 1950s, these 7 terracotta heads were found near a hillside just outside the modern-day province of Mpumalanga. At first glance, they seem almost playful, stylized faces with large eyes, long noses, and strange, elaborate headdresses. But as one looks more closely, something deeper begins to emerge. The expressions are solemn. The craftsmanship is precise. And the purpose remains unknown. The heads date back to roughly 500 AD. Made from fine clay and carefully smoothed, some of the pieces are large enough to fit over a human head, while others are smaller, perhaps meant for ritual display. Most have intricate surface markings, patterns etched around the cheeks and forehead, bands that may represent scarification or symbolic adornment. All seem to carry significance, but none speak directly of their meaning. Who made them? We know little about the people who shaped these faces. No written language remains, no grand ruins or stone inscriptions nearby. Only these hollow gazes and the mystery they carry. Some archaeologists believe the Lydenburg heads were used in ceremonial contexts, perhaps as masks worn during initiation rites, funerals, or ancestor veneration. Their hollow form suggests they may have been worn on the head or over the face, possibly as part of a transformation ritual, becoming someone or something else. Others propose they were offerings or guardians, placed near graves or shrines to protect or guide the soul. The symmetry of the features, the careful shaping, the attention to detail, all imply intention, not accident. These were not toys. They were sacred. And yet, their true purpose remains elusive. The cultural context of the Lydenburg heads has largely vanished, swept away by time and the movement of people. While later Bantu-speaking societies populated the region, the specific tradition that produced these objects appears to have faded or transformed, leaving few direct descendants. This absence has led to wider speculation. Could the Lydenburg heads be remnants of a forgotten cultural network? One that spanned further than we know, connecting southern Africa with distant centers of ritual practice? Might they echo the spiritual traditions of other ancient African societies, those who used masks and sculpture to bridge the world of the living and the dead? Some scholars point to parallels in West and Central Africa, where ceramic and wooden masks play central roles in rites of passage and ancestral worship. Others note the similarity to early terracotta traditions in West Africa, such as the Nok, which also produced stylized human forms, often with distinctive facial features and abstract symbolism. But these comparisons raise as many questions as they answer. Did similar ideas develop independently across Africa, shaped by shared cosmologies and responses to the land? Or was there a deeper network of exchange, an ancient, pre-literate communication of art and meaning that spanned forests, rivers, and deserts? We do not know. What we do know is that the Lydenburg heads are not merely decorative. Their presence speaks to an early society capable of symbolic thought, of artistic vision, and of deep spiritual life. In a time often characterized by historians as prehistoric, these faces tell a very different story, one of memory, of ritual, of identity, and perhaps of warning. One of the larger heads features a narrow slit in its mouth. The eyes, though wide, seem introspective. The head is smooth, deliberate. Is this a depiction of a priest, a chieftain, an ancestor, or something more abstract, a representation of the collective self, the spirit of a people? There are no answers carved in stone, only clay and silence. The region around Lydenburg has yielded other archaeological finds: pottery shards, iron tools, traces of early agriculture, but none carry the same haunting weight as the heads. They stand apart, unique in design, unaccompanied by clear context. Like sentinels, they watched over a past we no longer remember. And yet, they endure. In the cool quiet of museum glass, far from the hills where they once lay buried, the Lydenburg heads still seem to see. They meet our gaze not with fear or anger, but with calm, as if they have waited, as if they still wait. What secrets were shaped into their forms? What stories have they carried in silence? What rituals once filled the air around them with chants, with smoke, with the rhythms of memory? We may never fully know. But in the clay, cracked, worn, and eternal, something human remains. A trace of those who lived, who believed, who sculpted meaning from earth and breath. And somewhere in the hills of South Africa, perhaps more faces still sleep beneath the soil, waiting to be unearthed, waiting to be seen. As the silent faces of the Lydenburg heads retreat into shadow, faces molded from clay, yet still watching, we journey once more to West Africa. The land rises here, sharply and unexpectedly, in a place where sky and stone meet in quiet defiance. This is the Bandiagara Escarpment in modern-day Mali, a towering sandstone cliff stretching nearly 150 kilometers, its ridges etched by wind and time, its caverns once home to one of Africa's most spiritually complex cultures. The Dogon live here still. But among the rock faces and overgrown valleys of this ancient land, strange shapes linger. Faint, deliberate, and unexplained. These are the cryptic geoglyphs of the Bandiagara Escarpment, markings carved or arranged in ways no one fully understands. Seen from above, some appear as elongated lines etched into plateaus, others as circular clearings or peculiar alignments of stones. Some no wider than a few meters, others vast enough to stretch across the landscape like whispers only the earth remembers. To the casual eye, they might seem like natural formations, but their geometry, their precision, suggests intention, suggests meaning. What were they for? Were they territorial markers? Ritual pathways? Messages meant not for humans, but for the gods? Or for the stars? These questions remain unanswered. Most of the known geoglyphs were only identified in recent decades, as satellite imagery and aerial surveys offered a new perspective on the escarpment. From ground level, they blend almost perfectly with the surrounding terrain, worn by centuries of erosion, overgrown by grass, hidden in plain sight. But from above, patterns emerge. Straight lines that connect nothing, shapes with no obvious function, stone mounds aligned in ways that seem to defy randomness. To understand their mystery, one must understand the land they inhabit. The Bandiagara Escarpment has long been a place of cultural layering. Before the Dogon settled here, fleeing Islamic expansion centuries ago, the cliffs were home to the Telem, a people known mostly through their architecture. Granaries, burial chambers, and dwellings built into the vertical rock face, often in places so high and inaccessible that modern climbers struggle to reach them. Even today, how the Telem placed bodies in cliffside tombs remains a topic of speculation. But the geoglyphs, those strange formations across the land, do not seem to match known Telem or Dogon construction patterns. They do not serve storage, defense, or habitation. They serve something else. Some researchers have speculated that the markings may be ritualistic, connected to Dogon cosmology, which is itself famously intricate. The Dogon have long been known for their celestial knowledge, particularly regarding the star Sirius and its invisible companion, Sirius B. Though debated by scholars, this tradition suggests a profound connection between the Dogon and the night sky. Could the geoglyphs be mirrors of that sky? Ground-bound constellations meant to anchor the stars in earth and ceremony? Others propose they could be ancient calendars, tracking solstices or lunar cycles. There are hints, just hints, that some alignments may correspond with solar events. But definitive evidence remains elusive. The markings are too few, too weathered, too isolated from written record to yield easy answers. And yet, they persist. Even the Dogon themselves offer little in the way of explanation. Some elders acknowledge the shapes but attribute them to spirits or ancestors. Others say they were there long before their people arrived. The lines and clearings, they say, are not for the living to disturb. This air of reverence, of quiet inherited caution, only deepens the mystery. If the geoglyphs predate the Dogon and the Telem, who made them? There are no known texts, no accompanying artifacts, no burial sites that clearly connect the symbols to a specific culture. Unlike the Nazca lines of Peru, which have been extensively studied and mapped, the Bandiagara geoglyphs remain largely undocumented, largely unexplored. Is it possible that an older, forgotten people once lived here, leaving behind messages carved into the land rather than stone? Could these be echoes of a prehistoric belief system that saw earth, sky, and spirit as a seamless whole? Or is it that we are simply looking with the wrong eyes, trying to interpret meaning through the lens of modern logic, when the makers of these forms thought in a different language altogether? A language of shape, of silence, of place. As the sun dips behind the cliff walls, casting long shadows across the terrain, the geoglyphs seem to disappear once more, blending back into the land. They are not grand, not dramatic, but they are deliberate. They remind us that not all mysteries rise like pyramids or speak in gold. Some lie flat against the earth, weathered by time, seen only by those who pause and wonder. What were these shapes meant to say? Who were they meant for? And how many more remain, waiting in the soil, hidden just beyond the edge of our perception? In the stillness of the Bandiagara Escarpment, the earth speaks softly, and its message, whatever it may be, has yet to be fully heard. As the cryptic geoglyphs of the Bandiagara Escarpment fade into the distance, etched into the land like half-remembered songs, we turn now to a legend, one that crosses continents, bends history with myth, and touches on one of the most provocative themes in the human imagination: the idea of a lost kingdom ruled by warrior women. This is the story of Queen Califia and the enduring whispers of African Amazon kingdoms. The name Califia first appears in a 16th century Spanish novel, Las Sergas de Esplandian, written by Garci Rodriguez de Montalvo. In this tale, Califia is described as a powerful black queen who rules over a mythical island called California. Her realm is populated entirely by women, fierce, untamed, and noble warriors who live without men, raising griffins and battling with gold weapons. The land, rich in treasure and natural splendor, is set very close to the side of the terrestrial paradise. To most, this was fiction, pure romance in the age of conquest. And yet the name stuck. So much so that when Spanish explorers sailed along the western coast of North America, they christened the land California, imagining they had found the mythical island of Queen Calafia. But here is where the mystery begins to unfold. Why did Montalvo choose to depict Calafia as a black African queen? What inspired this image, this specific blend of femininity, power, and isolation? And could it reflect more than just imagination? Some historians believe the character of Calafia may have drawn inspiration from older African legends, oral traditions passed through Moorish Spain or gleaned from travelers' tales. Tales of female-led societies, warrior queens, matriarchal orders hidden in distant lands, echoes, perhaps, of real African kingdoms where women held military, political, or spiritual authority. In West Africa, the kingdom of Dahomey, located in present-day Benin, was home to the Mino, an all-female military regiment active from the 17th to 19th centuries. Known to European observers as the Dahomey Amazons, these women were highly trained, fiercely loyal, and deeply respected. They patrolled the royal palace, fought in wars, and occupied positions of influence. Their existence was no myth. But were they the first? Some researchers suggest that the idea of female warrior societies in Africa goes back much further, possibly to the Nubian kingdom of Kush, or even earlier. In ancient Nubian tombs, women have been found buried with weapons. In Egyptian records, some depictions of military formations include women among their ranks. And in Greek writings, there are references to Libyan Amazons, warrior women said to have roamed the regions of North Africa long before classical times. Could the legend of Queen Calafia be a fragmented memory of these powerful matriarchies, retold through centuries of cultural blending? Others go further, speculating that Calafia may not have been entirely fictional, that perhaps she was inspired by stories of a real queen, one who ruled in obscurity, her legacy preserved only in fragments. Some trace her roots to the semi-mythical land of Tarshish mentioned in ancient texts. Others to the kingdom of Saba or Sheba, where powerful queens once reigned with divine authority. In Ethiopia, oral traditions speak of ancient queen mothers who ruled before the Solomonic line, figures of both martial and spiritual power. In Mali, the legends of the Ouagadougou Empire tell of strong female rulers who rose during times of crisis. These stories are rarely written down, but they persist, in rhythm, in song, in memory. And what of the island of California itself? In Montalvo's tale, Calafia's realm is described as a place of abundance, defended by nature and magic, untouched by the outside world. It calls to mind not just the isolation of myth, but the geography of possibility, hidden realms just beyond the edge of maps. For centuries, explorers believed California to be a literal island. It appeared that way on early European maps, a paradise just out of reach. Could this imagined paradise have had a symbolic function, an echo of ancestral homelands carried in the minds of displaced peoples? A memory of a matriarchal society where gold was not hoarded but shared, and where strength was not gendered but sacred? Even in modern California, the legacy of Queen Calafia lingers. Statues of her stand in gardens. Murals depict her wrapped in gold, commanding beasts, her gaze both regal and knowing. She has been claimed as symbol by artists, feminists, spiritual seekers, and historians alike. But no one can quite agree on who she really was, or where she truly came from. Was Queen Calafia simply a creation of Renaissance fantasy, or a reflection, distorted and romanticized, of Africa's hidden histories? What truths lie beneath the surface of such legends? Across Africa, tales of female power endure. They are whispered around fires, danced into ceremonies, passed from mother to daughter. They do not always appear in the pages of official history, but they are alive, resilient, and profound. Perhaps Queen Calafia is not a single figure, but a composite, born from 1,000 stories, 1,000 queens, remembered in different forms across time. And perhaps, hidden beneath layers of myth, conquest, and forgetting, there once was a real kingdom, ruled by a queen, guarded by women, shaped by a power we are only beginning to rediscover. As the legend of Queen Calafia fades, woven from distant echoes of matriarchal power and sunlit islands, we travel now to a quieter mystery. One not etched in clay or carved into stone, but hidden in the stillness of water. In South Africa's Limpopo province, cradled by forested hills and watched over by ancestral spirits, lies a lake unlike any other. It is not large. It is not deep. And yet, for centuries, it has stirred awe, reverence, and unease. This is Lake Fundudzi, a sacred body of water held in deep veneration by the Venda people. A lake that is not merely observed, but greeted, bowed to, feared, and even now, not fully understood. The journey to Lake Fundudzi is not an easy one. The winding roads narrow as you ascend through the Soutpansberg Mountains. Mist clings to the trees, and the air grows thick with silence. The lake suddenly appears, nestled like a mirror in a high basin surrounded by lush vegetation. At first glance, it seems unremarkable, calm, green, still, but the feeling it evokes is immediate and unmistakable. This place is different. Unlike most lakes, Fundudzi is not approached carelessly. Traditionally, visitors must stop and perform a gesture of respect before continuing, turning their backs to the water and bowing low as if saluting an invisible presence. For the Venda, this is not a mere custom, it is a necessity. Lake Fundudzi is sacred, and what lies beneath its surface, they say, is not only water, but spirit. According to Venda oral tradition, the lake was formed long ago when a leper, denied sanctuary by a local village, cursed the land. The earth trembled, the village was swallowed, and in its place appeared the lake, quiet, watchful, and alive. From that moment, it became a spiritual boundary, a place where the living and the ancestral worlds touch. But this is not just folklore. Even today, Fundudzi is the site of ritual and reverence. The Domba dance, an elaborate coming-of-age ceremony for young women, is performed nearby. Drumming echoes through the valleys, connecting generations to the rhythms of their ancestors. Only initiated Venda elders are allowed to perform certain rites at the lake's edge. For others, it is taboo to swim, to fish, even to gaze too long. And there are other stories whispered rather than told. Some say that at night, the lake glows faintly, lit from below by forces unknown. Others claim to have seen strange figures moving across the water's surface, vanishing before they touch the shore. During times of drought, it is said the lake's level does not fall. In times of plenty, it does not rise. Some local accounts speak of drums sounding from beneath the water, heard only by those the ancestors choose. Scientists have long been curious about Fundudzi, yet few have studied it in detail. One of the lake's most puzzling features is its hydrology. It is fed by the Mutale River, but unlike most mountain lakes, it has no clear visible outlet. Water flows in, but where does it go? Some hydrologists speculate that the lake may drain underground, through porous rock or submerged fissures that have yet to be fully mapped. Others believe the lake could be geologically recent, formed by a massive landslide that dammed the valley. But none of these explanations fully account for its unnerving stability, or for the deep collective reverence it commands. There are those who argue that sacred landscapes often overlap with subtle natural phenomena, magnetic anomalies, acoustic effects, or rare optical conditions that ancient peoples perceived, honored, and mythologized. Could Fundudzi be one such place? Or is its power more psychological, more symbolic, a mirror not just of clouds and trees, but of the unseen? Some fringe theorists have gone further, linking Fundudzi to ideas of ancestral portals or geomantic hotspots, locations where the veil between dimensions is thinner. While such ideas lack scientific basis, they reflect a deeper human instinct, that some places do not merely exist in space, but in memory, in myth, and in something beyond both. Even within the Venda tradition, Fundudzi is not viewed as a static monument. It is an active presence, a living being, one to be spoken of with care and approached with humility. And perhaps that is what makes it so compelling. Unlike ruins or relics, Lake Fundudzi is not frozen in time. It is still here, still sacred, still surrounded by mystery. It continues to breathe, to reflect, to listen. What lies beneath its surface? A sunken village? An ancient spirit? Or something simpler but no less profound? The accumulated reverence of a people who have never stopped believing in its power? In the end, Lake Fundudzi reminds us that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some are meant to be witnessed, and some are meant to be bowed to. As the still waters of Lake Fundudzi fade behind us, sacred, silent, and filled with ancestral presence, we turn once again to the vast openness of the Sahara, but not to its heat or its emptiness. This time, we look closer, at the rock faces, the canyon walls, the wind-sculpted plateaus. Carved into the stone, sometimes alone, sometimes in great clusters, are markings, neither random nor recent. Symbols arranged with intent, etched by hands long vanished. They are known as Tifinagh, and while some forms of the script are still used today, many of these ancient inscriptions, scattered across the Sahara, remain undeciphered. Forgotten words from an unknown world. Stretching across the deserts of Algeria, Libya, Niger, Mali, and beyond, the Tifinagh script appears in hundreds of petroglyphs and stone engravings, some dating back nearly 2,500 years and possibly even older. They are found carved on cliffs in Tifinagh, on boulders near the Hogger Mountains, and on the walls of forgotten wadis, where once, long ago, water may have flowed. Some inscriptions are brief, a handful of symbols arranged in a line. Others are longer, winding across stone like a language mid-sentence. There are circles, arrows, forked lines, chevrons. Some resemble modern Tifinagh letters used today by the Tuareg and other Amazigh, Berber, peoples of North Africa. But many do not. Their meanings are unknown, their grammar lost, their speakers unnamed, who first carved them. We know that the Tifinagh alphabet is part of the ancient Libico-Berber script family, one of the oldest writing traditions in Africa. Its origins stretch back to at least the first millennium BC. But while modern variants have been preserved and adapted, especially among the Tuareg, whose distinctive vertical script continues to be used for poetry, signage, and identity, many of the earliest inscriptions remain stubbornly silent. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were deciphered thanks to the Rosetta Stone, no bilingual artifact exists for early Tifinagh. No parallel text has been found. The symbols stand alone, offering no translation, no key. Could they be names? Prayers? Territorial markers? Astronomical records? Some scholars suggest they were mnemonic devices, intended not to be read in full sentences, but to remind the reader of something already known. Others propose that they were part of a symbolic system tied to ritual, myth, or navigation, and that the script itself was not linguistic in the conventional sense. Still others argue that we simply lack the cultural framework needed to interpret them, that the symbols were part of a worldview too distant, too altered by time for easy reconstruction. What we do know is that the inscriptions are not isolated. They are often found alongside ancient rock art, elegant, fluid images of cattle, giraffes, hunters, and dancers. These artworks, many dating back to a period when the Sahara was still green, suggest a thriving culture, one that observed, celebrated, and recorded its world. The presence of writing alongside art raises tantalizing questions. Were the two connected? Did the symbols name the figures, tell stories, mark sacred ground? And why did this script, unlike others, never develop into a widely literate tradition? Unlike the scripts of Egypt, Mesopotamia, or the Mediterranean, Tifinagh did not evolve into a bureaucratic language. It left behind no temples lined with carved decrees, no tax ledgers, no chronicles of kings. Its use seems personal, intimate, local, and yet it spread across thousands of miles, etched into rocks across an entire continent. Some researchers believe the Tuareg preserved the script through oral transmission, adapting and protecting it even as empires rose and fell around them. Others suspect that earlier, more complex uses of the script were lost during migrations, invasions, or the long aridification of the Sahara that turned lush savannas into dust. Still, the symbols remain, clear, deliberate, and persistent. In recent years, advances in digital imaging and satellite analysis have brought new attention to these inscriptions. Entire regions of the desert, once thought barren, are being re-examined. Archaeologists are beginning to piece together patterns, clusters of inscriptions that suggest movement, contact, perhaps even forgotten networks of trade or pilgrimage. And yet, for all our modern tools, we still cannot read them. The enigma has given rise to more speculative theories. Some fringe voices claim the inscriptions were left by an advanced prehistoric civilization, now vanished. Others suggest they hold coded astronomical data or messages from a time before history. While such ideas stretch beyond accepted evidence, they reflect a deeper fascination, the desire to connect with those who came before us through something as human and as fragile as written words. What does it mean to find writing that no longer speaks? To see symbols so carefully carved, and yet to hear no voice? The Tifinagh inscriptions of the Sahara offer no clear answers, but they offer something perhaps more powerful: the quiet suggestion that there is still much we do not know about Africa's ancient past, that beneath the sand and written into stone are messages from those who watched the stars, who tended their herds, who buried their dead and marked the stone. Hoping, perhaps, that someone would one day understand. And perhaps, somewhere in the desert's long silence, that understanding still waits, unwritten, untranslated, yet enduring. As the sun fades over the wind-swept stones of the Sahara, where undeciphered symbols still whisper across time, we turn now toward the highlands of East Africa. Rising in jagged silence above the clouds, the Simien Mountains of northern Ethiopia are among the most dramatic landscapes on the continent. Their peaks stand like ancient sentinels, carved by volcanic fury and softened by wind and rain. Cliffs plunge into green valleys. Mist drapes over sheer escarpments. It is a land of breathtaking beauty and of secrets buried in stone. Among these secrets are tombs, hidden, forgotten, and still unexplained. Remote and largely inaccessible, the Simien Mountains have long been considered sacred ground. For centuries, local communities have whispered of ancient burials in the high places, graves tucked into caves, tombs carved into cliffsides, chambers sealed with silence. Some are simple, unadorned, meant for forgotten villagers, but others hint at something more, something royal, something sacred. Archaeologists and explorers have found only fragments. In a few remote caves, human remains have been uncovered, some accompanied by beads, pottery, and rusted iron objects. In others, signs of more elaborate construction appear. Dressed stone blocks, narrow staircases hewn into rock, and walls darkened by soot and age. Yet most of the tombs remain unexcavated, their locations passed down through oral tradition or known only to the mountain's shepherds and monks. Who lies buried here? Some believe the tombs may date to the Aksumite period, an era of Ethiopian grandeur that spanned from the 1st century AD to the early medieval period. The kingdom of Aksum was one of the great civilizations of the ancient world, a trading empire, a center of early Christianity, and a culture that carved its churches and monuments into the very bones of the earth. But the Simien tombs may be older still. Some local legends speak of an even earlier people, long vanished, who came to the high mountains to bury their dead in the clouds, believing that the higher the body, the closer the soul would be to the divine. In this worldview, death was not a descent, but an ascent. The tombs were not hidden out of fear, but placed with intention, protected by height, wind, and stone. Why choose the Simien Mountains? These mountains are not merely tall, they are otherworldly. Their remote plateaus and vertical cliffs create natural fortresses, isolated, difficult to reach, and defensible. It is easy to see why ancient peoples may have believed them sacred. Monks still live in hermitages scattered across the range, accessible only by treacherous climbs and faith. In their solitude, the lines between past and present, between prayer and memory, seem to blur. But the tombs, what do they hold? Could they belong to a forgotten dynasty? Perhaps a highland branch of Aksumite royalty, or a religious sect seeking seclusion from the political centers of power. Or are they older still, remnants of a time before Aksum, before recorded Ethiopian history? Few detailed studies have been conducted. Political instability, difficult terrain, and the deep cultural sensitivity surrounding burial sites have left most of the Simien tombs undisturbed. Their contents, if any remain, are still locked behind walls of rock and taboo. And yet, hints of something more significant continue to emerge. In one site, an oddly symmetrical chamber was found, its entrance marked by stone columns. Within it, no bones were recovered, but the walls bore faint carvings, unlike anything seen in known Aksumite or post-Aksumite contexts. Spirals, crosses, intersecting lines. Were these early Christian symbols, pre-Christian markings, or the remnants of a forgotten ritual language? Some have drawn comparisons between these sites and other rock-hewn traditions across Ethiopia, particularly in Lalibela, where entire churches were carved from living rock. Could the same hands, or the same knowledge, have shaped both? Others propose more speculative ideas, that the Simien tombs may connect to the lost traditions of the Queen of Sheba, whose legacy in Ethiopia is shrouded in both history and myth. That perhaps these mountains served as burial grounds for high priests, or as depositories of sacred relics hidden during times of war. Even whispers of the Ark of the Covenant's journey have been linked, however faintly, to these remote highlands. But these remain questions, speculations. What we do know is that the Simien Mountains have kept their secrets well. Even today, few venture into their most remote corners. The terrain is unforgiving. The trails vanish without warning, and the tombs, when they are found, reveal little. No golden treasures, No grand inscriptions, just the weight of stone, the hush of altitude, and the sense that something ancient lies just beyond reach. Perhaps the tombs are meant to remain hidden, protected not by chance, but by choice. Or perhaps they are waiting, like so many mysteries of Africa's deep past, for the right eyes to see them, to understand them, to listen. What stories lie beneath the stone? What names? What lives? In the high silence of the Simien Mountains, the dead still sleep, and the mountain still watches. As the veiled tombs of Ethiopia's Simien Mountains retreat into shadow, quiet guardians of forgotten kings, we descend once more into the dry embrace of the Nile. But this is not the familiar stretch that runs through Egypt. This is farther south, deeper into the deserts and floodplains of ancient Nubia, in what is now modern-day Sudan. Here, among arid sands and scattered stone, lie monuments that defy simple categorization. Not pyramids, not temples, but towering stones arranged in patterns, clustered on remote plateaus, and aligned to mysteries long buried. These are the ancient megaliths of Sudan, and some believe they hold a forgotten key to understanding Nubia's deeper past. At first glance, they resemble other megalithic sites across the world: standing stones, dolmen-like structures, burial markers rising from the earth. But in the harsh light of the Sudanese sun, their shapes take on new meaning. Some are solitary, planted upright in isolation, while others stand in rows or circles, their orientations purposeful. Many are found near prehistoric burial sites, others alone, as if keeping vigil. Scattered across regions such as Kassala, near the Eritrean border, or in the Butana region of eastern Sudan, these stones speak of an architectural tradition that predates written history. Some of them are believed to date back to the Neolithic period, possibly as early as 3000 BC. And yet, their exact purpose remains unclear. Were they burial markers, astronomical calendars, territorial symbols, or were they something more? What makes these sites particularly compelling is their geographic and cultural proximity to ancient Nubia, a civilization that, at its peak, rivaled Egypt in splendor, complexity, and spiritual depth. From the royal pyramids at Meroe to the temples of Nabta and the painted tombs of El Kuru, Nubia's legacy is both immense and underappreciated. But before the rise of the Kushite kingdoms and the appearance of pyramidal architecture, what existed here? Some scholars believe the megaliths offer a glimpse. Could they be remnants of Proto-Nubian societies, tribes and lineages whose beliefs, rituals, and cosmologies shaped what would become the great Nubian kingdoms? If so, the megaliths are more than stones. They are the earliest punctuation marks in a story yet to be told. Archaeological surveys have revealed patterns. Some megalithic sites are aligned with solstices, others with nearby wadis or now vanished watercourses. This suggests not random placement, but a system, possibly spiritual, possibly agricultural, or both. Stone circles in the region bear resemblance to those found farther west in Africa, such as the Senegambian circles, raising questions about whether ancient migratory or cultural threads once spanned vast parts of the continent. Still, unlike in Egypt or Mesopotamia, no written texts accompany these megaliths. No inscriptions explain their builders' intentions. The people who raised them left no recorded names. But perhaps Nubia itself holds the key. As Egypt turned northward toward the Mediterranean, Nubia often turned inward, toward Africa. Its art, language, and religion bore the marks of deep local roots. The worship of Apetamak, the lion-headed war god, the prominence of queens and matriarchs, the unique burial customs, all speak to a civilization shaped not by imitation, but by independent growth. Could the megaliths have been part of that early cultural foundation? Some historians point to parallels between these prehistoric monuments and the later royal burial sites in Nubia, particularly the tumuli graves of Kerma and the steep, narrow pyramids of Meroe. The transition from megalithic markers to monumental tombs may represent not a break, but an evolution. From simple upright stones to more complex expressions of sacred space. Others suggest that the megaliths served as early territorial or clan markers, their stone arrangements encoding genealogies or alliances lost to time. In this view, the stones were storytellers, records of belonging, memory, and myth. A language not of words, but of placement, scale, and silence. And yet, there are more speculative ideas. Some researchers have proposed that the megaliths reflect an ancient understanding of the stars, aligned to Sirius, Orion, or lunar cycles. This would mirror similar practices in ancient Egypt, and even among the Dogon farther west. Were these stones early tools of sky watchers? Did they mark sacred nights, seasonal changes, or the path of the soul? More fringe theories go further still, suggesting lost civilizations, buried knowledge, or forgotten links between Nubia and other ancient centers of power. While such claims remain beyond mainstream scholarship, they reflect a growing awareness that African antiquity holds layers of complexity still largely unexplored. The challenge is not lack of evidence, but lack of attention. Decades of political instability, shifting academic focus, and the difficulty of desert archaeology have left many Sudanese megalithic sites understudied. Some remain entirely undocumented. Others have been lost to erosion, looting, or neglect. And yet, they endure, unmarked on most maps, unknown to most of the world, but standing still, watching the sky, guarding the dead, holding space for a history not yet fully told. What if these stones are the first monuments of Nubia? What if, before kings and temples, before gold and conquest, there were only these markers, simple, enduring, and sacred? And what if they were never meant to speak in our terms at all? Perhaps the message was always elemental, stone, shadow, horizon, and perhaps in those quiet geometries, something essential remains, an ancient heartbeat of Africa's hidden past, still pulsing beneath the sand. Waiting, as the desert wind settles over the megaliths of ancient Sudan, stones standing in silent witness to Nubia's forgotten depths, we travel westward, across the Sahel and into the rain-drenched forests of southern Nigeria. Here, among the sprawling roots of the Yoruba heartland, lies the ancient city of Ife, a city of myth and memory, believed by many to be the spiritual cradle of humanity. And here, beneath the red earth, something extraordinary was discovered, something that continues to stir both wonder and confusion. Bronze heads, cast in metal with stunning detail and uncanny realism. Their eyes still gaze out across time, but their story remains only partially understood. The Ife heads, as they are now known, first came to light in the early 20th century. Unearthed accidentally by laborers or farmers, they seemed almost too perfect to be real. Sculpted with exquisite naturalism, the faces are calm and symmetrical. The brows are high, the noses noble, the lips full and closed with quiet authority. Many are adorned with crowns or beaded veils, symbols of rank, divinity, or both. Their surfaces are marked with fine lines, suggesting ritual scarification, and their presence is commanding. But what startled the world was not just their beauty, it was their age. Radiocarbon dating and contextual analysis placed the heads between the 12th and 15th centuries AD, in some cases, possibly earlier. At a time when much of Europe was still emerging from the Middle Ages, The artisans of Ife were casting sculptures that rivaled and in many ways surpassed the portraiture of Renaissance Europe. The materials used, copper alloys, high-purity bronze, even glass beads, show a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy and artistic technique. The lost wax casting process used to create these works was not only precise but also well-established, suggesting generations of technological refinement. But who were these artists, and where did they acquire such skill? According to Yoruba tradition, Ife is not merely an old city, it is the origin, the place where the gods first descended to create the world, the site of divine kingship and ancestral authority. Its rulers were seen as spiritual intermediaries, their heads considered the seat of the soul. In this cosmology, sculpting the head was not an act of art. It was an invocation of the sacred. And yet, outside of oral tradition, few written records from the period remain. The Ife civilization left behind no archives, no chronicles, no manifestos. Only these hauntingly lifelike sculptures and silence. Early European archaeologists, unable to reconcile the heads with their expectations of African art, theorized that the bronzes must have come from outside the continent. Some claimed they were of Greek or Egyptian origin, brought by shipwreck or trade. Others suggested they were crafted by a lost Mediterranean people, perhaps the fabled survivors of Atlantis. These theories, now discredited, reflected not the truth of the heads, but the blindness of the discoverers. Because there was no mystery in Ife itself. The Yoruba had always known of the bronzes. They were part of their shrines, their rituals, their memory. What was astounding was not that the heads existed, but that the outside world had never believed they could. Still, questions remain. How did Ife develop such an advanced metalworking tradition in relative isolation? Were there now lost cities, workshops, or master guilds that produced these pieces over generations? Could Ife have been part of a wider, more interconnected trade network than we currently understand, reaching across the Sahara to North Africa, or down the Niger River to other ancient centers? Some scholars believe that Ife's metal came from distant mines, perhaps as far as the Congo Basin or beyond. Others point to the presence of imported glass beads, originating as far away as India or the Islamic world, as evidence of a vast exchange system. And yet, the bronzes themselves are unmistakably local. The facial features, the regalia, the symbols, all rooted in Yoruba identity. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in how the bronzes were made, but why. What purpose did they serve? Some were clearly royal portraits commemorating sacred kings. Others appear to be ritual masks or symbolic heads used in religious rites. A few seem older, more abstract, representing ancestors, deities, or forces we no longer recognize. Were they created for altars, for tombs, for communication with the divine? And why did the tradition, so advanced and precise, seem to fade by the 16th century? As kingdoms rose and fell across West Africa, Benin, Oyo, Dahomey, the bronze tradition continued, but in altered forms. Ife's classical realism was never quite repeated. Its purity, its balance, its subtlety remained singular, as though it had emerged fully formed, burned bright for a few centuries, and then receded into myth. Could this suggest a deeper lineage, a cultural inheritance from a lost civilization, a sacred technique known only to a priestly caste and never fully shared? Or was it simply the flowering of genius in a city that saw itself as the center of the world? The Ife heads still reside in museums and shrines around the globe. Some were taken during colonial expeditions and now rest behind glass in Europe. Others remain in Nigeria, honored in the royal city they once adorned. But wherever they are, they provoke the same feeling: awe. Awe that something so refined could emerge from a place so long overlooked. Awe that a face from the 13th century could still meet your eyes with such calm. And awe that, even now, we do not know their full story. What inspired these heads? What were their names? And how many still lie buried beneath the earth, waiting to be found? In Ife, the gods once walked among mortals, and perhaps, in bronze, they still do. As the bronze faces of Ife retreat into shadow, etched with divine calm, yet still gazing outward, we journey farther inland, toward the heart of West Africa. Here, along the floodplains of the Niger River, where the soil is rich and the waters shift with the seasons, rise the remains of one of Africa's oldest known urban centers. Its walls have crumbled. Its towers are gone. And yet, beneath the dust, fragments of a great city lie hidden. This is Djenné-Djenno, a name once spoken by merchants and kings, now carried only in clay and silence. The land here is warm, flat, and golden. Mud brick homes rise gently from the earth, their rounded edges shaped by centuries of tradition. Modern Djenné is famous for its great mosque, an earthen marvel of Sahelian architecture. But just a few kilometers to the southeast lies a mound, a tell, unassuming, eroded by time, yet deeply layered with the residue of an ancient civilization. Djenné-Djenno, meaning ancient Djenné, is believed to have been first settled around 250 BC, possibly earlier. Long before the rise of Mali, before the Songhai Empire or the trans-Saharan caravans, this city thrived. Its people built homes from mud brick, raised granaries, worked iron, and engaged in far-reaching trade. By 800 AD, it had become a bustling urban hub, home to tens of thousands, at a time when much of Europe was still rural and fragmented. Yet what makes Djenné-Djenno so enigmatic is not just its age or size, but its sudden silence. By around 1400 AD, the city was largely abandoned. Its life moved upriver, absorbed perhaps into the growing power of Islamic Djenné. The original site faded, swallowed by earth and memory. And even today, we know surprisingly little about the people who built it. No written records have survived, no royal names, no epic tales carved in stone, only shards of pottery, some marked with elegant designs, terracotta figures, metal tools, and the layers of architecture stacked beneath the surface. These artifacts hint at complexity, continuity, and wealth, but leave many questions unanswered. Who were these early urban dwellers? How did they organize themselves? Was Djenné-Djenno ruled by kings, councils, or elders? Did it have religious centers, schools, or temples now lost beneath the silt? Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of long-distance trade. Beads from as far as North Africa and the Middle East, copper from distant mines, and glassy stones not native to the region. Djenné-Djenno was not isolated. It was connected, part of a web that may have stretched across the continent, linking farmers, artisans, and traders in a vast, decentralized economy. Yet curiously, the people of Djenné-Djenno appear to have avoided the kind of monumental architecture seen elsewhere. There are no palaces, no stone monuments, no towering temples. Everything was built in mud brick, renewable, perishable, humble. Was this a cultural choice? A reflection of egalitarian values? Or have we simply not yet found what lies deeper? And what of the terracotta figures? Dozens have been unearthed, though many more were stolen and trafficked through illegal antiquities markets. These sculptures range from stylized human forms, sometimes seated, sometimes kneeling, to animals and hybrid creatures. Some wear jewelry, others bear signs of illness or deformity. Were they religious icons, ancestral effigies, symbols of social roles? Some scholars believe they reflect a cosmology in which humans, animals, and spirits were interwoven. Others suggest they may have been used in healing rituals or burial rites. But without inscriptions, without temples, their meaning remains open. And then there are the more speculative ideas. Some theorists point to the striking similarities between Djenné-Djenno's urban pattern, its concentric layout, its communal wells, its extensive use of clay, and ancient cities farther east, even drawing comparisons to the Indus Valley or Nile Delta settlements. Could there have been a deeper link between Africa's riverine civilizations? Shared knowledge passed down through millennia? Or are these similarities simply convergent responses to climate and geography? Others suggest that the abrupt decline of Djenné-Djenno might point to a more mysterious cause. Was it environmental? Did changes in river patterns or rainfall drive the population away? Was it disease? Conflict? Or did the city simply evolve, its people merging into new identities, carrying their culture into the growing Islamic world? Today, the site remains largely unexcavated. Because it lies near a sacred town, and because traditional beliefs still hold sway, archaeological work has been limited. Much of Djenné-Djenno's story remains underground, untouched, unread, waiting. What we do know is this: Djenné-Djenno is among the oldest known cities in sub-Saharan Africa. It challenges long-held narratives that Africa's urban history began with external contact. It proves that cities rose here on their own terms, rooted in river systems, sustained by trade, shaped by values we are still learning to decode. And yet, it also reminds us how easily greatness can be forgotten. Beneath a few meters of soil lie centuries of innovation, culture, and human connection. Not erased, but buried. Not vanished, but waiting to be understood. What else sleeps beneath the Niger's shifting banks? What other cities rose and fell, their names never written, their stories carried only in the clay? Djenné-Djenno speaks softly, but it still speaks. As the buried cityscape of Djenné-Djenno fades beneath layers of history and clay, we follow the rainforest southward, toward the heart of what was once one of Africa's most powerful kingdoms. Here, among the humid plains of present-day southern Nigeria, lie the remnants of something staggering in scale. Not a forgotten palace or temple, but a wall. A vast earthwork of such ambition and complexity that, even today, it challenges the limits of our understanding. This is the Great Wall of Benin, a feat of ancient engineering so immense, so precise, that most of the world still doesn't know it ever existed. At first glance, the remains may appear modest. Fragments of trenches, low embankments, red earth ridges swallowed by vegetation and time. But these are not the remains of a single wall. They are part of a network, a system of ramparts and moats that once encircled the ancient kingdom of Benin. According to both local tradition and archaeological study, these walls were constructed over centuries, beginning as early as 800 AD and continuing well into the 15th century. At its peak, the complex stretched over 16,000 kilometers in total length, encompassing not only the city of Benin itself, but hundreds of surrounding villages, towns, and satellite communities. For comparison, this ancient African wall system was once 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China, enclosing more than 6,000 square kilometers of territory. It was, in terms of sheer scale, one of the largest man-made structures ever built. How was this possible? Constructed not from stone, but from compacted earth, the Benin walls were dug from massive ditches known as Iya. Earth was removed to create deep trenches and then piled up to form ramparts along the outer edge. The inner sides of the moats were steep, while the outer walls were topped with thick wooden palisades. In some areas, the embankments reached over 6 meters high, fortified further by thorny vegetation and guarded gates. This was not just a defense system. It was urban planning. The walls delineated neighborhoods, regulated trade, protected sacred spaces, and formed a symbolic spine for the highly organized kingdom. At the heart of it all was the royal city of Benin, a city of wide streets, orderly markets, and grand courtyards ruled by the Oba, or king. European visitors in the 15th and 16th centuries, including Portuguese and Dutch explorers, were astonished by its layout and order. They compared it to the great cities of Europe and marveled at the engineering of its walls. And yet, today, almost nothing of it remains in the global consciousness. Why has such a monumental achievement faded from view? Part of the answer lies in history itself. In 1897, British forces launched a punitive expedition against Benin, burning the royal city to the ground. The looting of the palace and the dispersal of the famous Benin bronzes have become emblematic of colonial plunder. But in that violent moment, something else was lost as well: the memory of the wall. What remained of the Great Wall of Benin began to erode, both physically and culturally. Urban sprawl, agricultural development, and neglect wore away at the embankments. Today, only scattered fragments are visible, mostly known to local communities and a handful of scholars. But the questions remain. How did a pre-industrial kingdom mobilize the manpower and resources to build such an enormous structure over such a vast area? How did they measure distances, plan logistics, and maintain coherence across hundreds of kilometers without modern surveying tools? Was it built continuously, or in stages across generations? And who organized it? Some historians suggest that the walls were a product of deep communal effort, sustained by the authority of the Oba and his court. Others believe the walls may have emerged more organically, growing as the city expanded, adapting over time. But even this does not explain the scale, the precision, the vision behind it all. Then there are the more speculative theories. Some propose that the layout of the walls may have held symbolic meaning, mapping cosmological principles, clan hierarchies, or even ancient astrological knowledge encoded into the very structure of the city. Others look to oral traditions, which speak of spirits that guarded the city's borders, and walls built not just for enemies, but to protect something sacred within. Could the walls have served more than a practical purpose? Were they also a spiritual boundary, defining not just space, but identity? Even the materials raise questions. The compacted laterite earth used in construction has proved remarkably durable. In some sections, remnants of the moats and embankments are still visible, resisting centuries of erosion. Were special techniques used to bind the soil? Did the builders possess knowledge now forgotten? Satellite imaging and archaeological mapping continue to uncover new segments, many still hidden beneath modern settlements. The true extent of the walls may never be fully known. They are a buried monument to a kingdom whose complexity defied European expectations and continues to challenge ours. And so we are left with a paradox. One of the largest human-made earthworks in history, larger than the Great Wall of China in total length, older than many medieval fortresses, lies mostly forgotten, uncelebrated, its memory fractured and half-buried beneath a city still living. Why is it not widely taught? Why have its secrets not yet been fully uncovered? And how many other structures, still cloaked by forest, sand, or time, lie waiting to remind us of Africa's hidden architectural past? The Great Wall of Benin stands, not in stone, but in silence. And in that silence, a question echoes. What else have we yet to see? As we leave behind the buried legacy of the Great Wall of Benin, its earthen ridges echoing with forgotten footsteps, we shift our gaze northward. Beyond the Sahel, past the shifting dunes and scorching winds of the Sahara, lies a region that was once home to a thriving, complex civilization. Where today only sand and stone remain, there once stood a network of cities, underground water systems, and caravan routes that pulsed with life. This was the land of the Garamantes, a name whispered in Roman texts, lost for centuries beneath the desert and rediscovered only in fragments. Their rise is impressive, their achievements unexpected, but it is their disappearance that casts the longest shadow. The Fezzan region of southwestern Libya is among the harshest environments on Earth. Endless desert plains stretch to the horizon, broken only by plateaus of black rock and the occasional oasis. Yet, in this hostile land, the Garamantes built something remarkable. From around 500 BC to 700 AD, they thrived. They created fortified settlements, practiced agriculture in one of the world's driest climates, and even established a system of writing, now barely understood. They were not nomads, they were urban, and they were advanced. The heart of their success lay underground. The Garamantes engineered a vast network of subterranean channels known as fogaras, gentle, sloping tunnels that tapped into ancient fossil aquifers deep beneath the Sahara. This water system allowed them to irrigate crops, support livestock, and sustain large populations in a region where rainfall was nearly non-existent. From the desert, they coaxed life. Their capital, Garama, modern-day Jerma, was a city of stone and mud brick, surrounded by date palms and fields. At its height, it may have supported over 4,000 inhabitants, with tens of thousands more living in satellite villages across the region. Archaeological remains include houses, cemeteries, and traces of temples or shrines, and all of it was supported by a desert infrastructure so well adapted, so efficient, that some of it still functions today. But the Garamantes were more than engineers. They were traders, warriors, and, at times, rivals to Rome. Ancient Roman sources, most notably Herodotus, Pliny, and Tacitus, describe the Garamantes with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. They were said to be fierce charioteers, skimming across the desert on light, fast wheels. They controlled caravan routes deep into the interior of Africa, trading in gold, ivory, and slaves. At one point, they even raided Roman territory, prompting the empire to strike back. Yet for all their visibility in Roman records, the Garamantes left behind few written traces of their own. Their script, if ever fully developed, remains undeciphered. Their language is unknown. And while their settlements have been partially excavated, vast portions of their world remain beneath the sand. And then, they vanished. By the 8th century AD, the Garamantes were gone. Their cities fell silent. Their fogaras collapsed. Their name faded from history. What happened? One theory is environmental. The fossil water they had relied upon for centuries, trapped in underground aquifers left from a greener Sahara, was finite. Once it was depleted, their agricultural system would have collapsed. Without water, the cities could not survive. Another explanation lies in shifting trade routes. As maritime commerce expanded and new trans-Saharan corridors emerged, the Garamantes may have been bypassed. Cut off from the economic lifelines they had once dominated, their influence withered. Others point to conflict. As Islamic expansion swept across North Africa in the 7th and 8th centuries, existing kingdoms and city-states were drawn into new political and religious realities. The Garamantes may have been absorbed, displaced, or erased. And yet, the traces they left behind suggest a society far more complex than once believed. In the 1960s, aerial photography revealed the full scope of their civilization: hundreds of settlements, irrigation systems, and roadways stretching across the desert. Some archaeologists now believe the Garamantes built one of the earliest proto-states in sub-Saharan Africa, predating even the rise of the Ghana Empire. Still, questions linger. Why did they invest so heavily in building a civilization in one of the planet's most inhospitable regions? Did they descend from an even older people, inheriting knowledge of the desert's hidden waters? Could they have had links to other ancient Saharan cultures, whose rock art and symbols still adorn caves in places like Tifinagh? Some have speculated cautiously that the Garamantes may have been descendants of the mysterious sea peoples, or even connected to the Neolithic Saharan civilizations that flourished when the desert was green. These ideas remain speculative, but they underscore how much we still don't know. The Sahara has always hidden as much as it reveals. In recent decades, political instability and environmental challenges have stalled further exploration of Garamantes sites. Many settlements remain unexcavated. Others are at risk from erosion, looting, or encroaching modern development. But beneath the sand, the remnants of a lost civilization still wait, silent and mostly intact. What stories would their walls tell? What wisdom lies buried in their collapsed water tunnels or inscribed in a language no one can yet read? The Garamantes rose in a land thought uninhabitable. They built cities where none should have stood, and then, without warning, they disappeared, leaving behind a mystery written not in chronicles but in sand, stone, and shadow. Are we close to understanding them, or are they meant to remain a question, etched into the desert, just beyond our reach? As we leave the arid silence of the Sahara and the fading traces of the Garamantes, the landscape transforms. We drift northward, where sand gives way to sea, where the waters of the Mediterranean ripple with secrets still untold. Beneath the silt and shadow of Egypt's northern coast, a city once lost to time is slowly being rediscovered. Heraklion, known to the ancient Egyptians as Thonis, was once a gateway to a kingdom, a vibrant harbor city filled with temples, treasures, and myth. For centuries, it was believed to be little more than legend, but now it lies submerged, preserved in the quiet gloom of the sea, waiting to tell its story. Just off the coast of the Nile Delta, near the modern city of Alexandria, divers descend into a world unlike any other. Through murky waters, colossal statues emerge from the deep, carved from granite, still bearing the faces of forgotten gods. The remains of temples, colossal pillars, and ancient anchors rest undisturbed on the seabed, draped in marine life, but unmistakably human. How does an entire city vanish beneath the waves? Historical records describe Heraklion as a critical trading hub as early as the 12th century BC. It served as the main port for ships entering Egypt from the Greek world, long before Alexandria was founded. Herodotus wrote of it. So did Strabo and Diodorus. They spoke of a great temple to Amun-Gareb, of priests and pharaohs, and of Helen of Troy, who, some say, once sought refuge there with Paris before the war. But by the 2nd century BC, Heraklion was gone, forgotten. Absent from maps, its memory scattered through half-believed legends and obscure texts. And then, in the year 2000, it was found. French marine archaeologist Franck Godiot and his team, searching the Bay of Aboukir for lost ships from the Napoleonic era, stumbled instead upon something older, far older. Using sonar and magnetometry, they traced stone blocks, colossal statues, and carved inscriptions buried beneath layers of sediment. What emerged was beyond anything they had expected: an entire city submerged and preserved. The discovery included over 60 shipwrecks, hundreds of anchors, coins, jewelry, and ceremonial objects, including a 5.4-meter-tall statue of the god Hapi, the Nile's personification, lying broken and buried, yet hauntingly intact. These were not the leftovers of a forgotten village. They were the remains of a spiritual and economic capital. So what happened? Why did Heraklion vanish? Mainstream theories point to natural disasters. Geological studies suggest that the city was built on unstable, waterlogged ground. Earthquakes, rising sea levels, and the gradual liquefaction of the soil may have caused the foundations to fail. Over time, entire structures would have sunk, swallowed not in a single cataclysm, but over decades, even centuries. But other questions persist. Why is the city so well preserved? Why were so many temples, statues, and artifacts left behind, seemingly undisturbed? Was there forewarning? Or did something force the people to abandon Heraklion suddenly? Some researchers have begun to wonder if the collapse of Heraklion was tied to broader patterns, climate shifts, political turmoil, or economic decline. Others consider the religious significance of the site. Heraklion was not just a port, it was a sacred place, a city of rites and rituals. Was it protected or buried by intention? A few fringe theories, while speculative, raise intriguing possibilities. Could Heraklion have held knowledge or artifacts too powerful to be left exposed? Was the city connected to lost traditions or forbidden rites tied to the mystery cults of the Mediterranean? Some note the alignment of the temples with celestial patterns, or the inscriptions that hint at offerings made to placate divine forces from the sea. These ideas remain unproven, but they illustrate the magnetic pull the city still holds over the imagination. And what else lies beneath the silt? Only a fraction of Heraklion has been excavated. Much of it remains undisturbed, shrouded in layers of sediment and darkness. Each new dive yields something unexpected: a piece of pottery, an inscribed tablet, a fragment of a building that defies known chronology. In a world where so many ancient cities were destroyed by conquest, Heraklion's slow descent into the sea offers a different kind of mystery. It was not erased by fire or sword. It was simply lost. And in its loss, it was preserved. The ocean, often the great eraser of history, became here a reluctant archivist, sealing Heraklion in a silent tomb of salt and stone. What else sleeps beneath those waves? Could other sunken cities remain hidden along Africa's coasts, waiting for the right current, the right question, the right light to reveal them? The story of Heraklion is far from finished. Its artifacts speak, but not yet in full sentences. Its temples have form, but not yet meaning. The gods it honored are named, but their rituals remain obscure. As archaeologists continue to unearth its secrets, one can't help but wonder, was Heraklion merely a city? Or was it a threshold, a liminal place between land and sea, past and present, myth and memory? What will we discover when we listen more closely to the silence of the sea? As Heraklion slips back beneath the waves, its granite gods and drowned temples swallowed by centuries of silence, we turn our gaze once more to the desert, but this time, not to the sands of Egypt or Libya, but deeper, into the heart of the Sahara, where sun scorches stone and the wind whispers the names of things long forgotten. Among these whispers is a name that has echoed for over 1,000 years. A name that appears in ancient manuscripts, trade records, and oral traditions. A name that points toward a city, once mighty, now lost. The city of Yam. In the vast emptiness of the Nubian desert, stretching across modern-day southern Egypt and northern Sudan, there is little to suggest that anything grand once stood here. The landscape is desolate, marked by rocky plateaus and barren plains. Temperatures soar by day and plummet by night. And yet, somewhere in this wilderness, the kingdom of Yam may have flourished. The first known mention of Yam appears in Egyptian records from the 6th dynasty during the reign of Pharaoh Merenre around 2300 BC. A royal courtier and explorer named Harkhuf documented his travels to the land of Yam in a series of letters carved into the walls of his tomb in Aswan. He speaks of long expeditions, of negotiations with foreign rulers, and of exotic goods brought back from the south: incense, ivory, ebony, and dancing pygmies. But what exactly was Yam? Where was it? And why did it vanish so completely from history? Most scholars agree that Yam was a powerful Nubian polity located somewhere south of Elephantine, perhaps near the modern-day border of Sudan, but its exact location has never been definitively identified. Some theories place it in the Wadi Hawar region, near the remnants of ancient riverbeds that once linked Central Africa to the Nile. Others believe Yam may have been closer to the Enedi Plateau in Chad, or even farther west, its influence radiating through a network of caravan routes that predated later trans-Saharan trade. And yet, no archaeological site has ever been confirmed as Yam. No ruins, no inscriptions, no buried city walls, only a name etched in Egyptian stone, floating across millennia. Could Yam have been a nomadic culture, its people building with wood and mud that left no lasting trace? Or was it deliberately erased, its records lost in dynastic conflicts, its settlements consumed by the desert? The mystery deepens when we consider what Yam represented to the Egyptians. It was not simply a source of goods. It was a gateway, a connection to the deeper interior of Africa, to lands of mystery and abundance. Some scholars even suggest that Yam may have controlled or facilitated access to the fabled land of Punt, a region often described as Egypt's divine trading partner, source of gold, incense, and myrrh. Could Yam have been more than a kingdom? Could it have been a nexus? A meeting point of African civilizations long before recorded history. Adding to the intrigue are the oral traditions of various Saharan and Sahelian peoples, stories that speak of great cities lost to the desert, of rivers that once flowed across sand, of ancient peoples who vanished without a trace. Could these be distant echoes of Yam? In more speculative circles, some propose that Yam was not just a political entity but a spiritual or symbolic one, a center of sacred knowledge, or even a proto-city aligned with celestial patterns. The idea is not so far-fetched when one considers that many ancient African societies placed deep importance on astronomy, cosmology, and sacred geography. And then there is the question of why Yam disappeared. Did climate change doom the kingdom? Around 2000 BC, the Sahara underwent a dramatic transformation. What had once been a green and semi-arid landscape began to dry. Rivers vanished. Lakes receded. Human settlements were forced to migrate or perish. If Yam had relied on these now vanished waterways, its demise might have been inevitable. But still, why so little evidence? The Egyptians mentioned Yam several times over the course of a century, and then silence. No more references, no more trade missions. It's as though Yam simply ceased to exist. Or perhaps it changed names, merged, moved. Could Yam have evolved into one of the later Nubian kingdoms, Kush, Napata, or Meroe? Could it have been absorbed, its identity overwritten by newer powers? Or did it fall victim to a fate more unusual? Some theorists suggest that the Egyptians may have deliberately omitted further references to Yam for political or religious reasons. Others wonder whether Yam's location, perhaps still unknown, holds archaeological riches just waiting to be uncovered. What if the kingdom of Yam still lies beneath the sands, untouched by time? Could ancient walls lie hidden beneath desert dunes, preserved in the dry heat? Might tablets, statues, or burial sites remain buried beneath centuries of sediment? We simply don't know. And that's what makes the story of Yam so compelling. It is a riddle written in stone and silence, a name that persists with no form, a city that once spoke with the pharaohs and then vanished. So we ask again, where is Yam? Was it swallowed by the sands, erased by time, or is it still there, quietly waiting to be rediscovered? Sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not those we solve, but those that continue to ask questions. As the winds of the Sahara shift endlessly across the buried paths of Yam, we journey south, leaving the sand and silence behind for a world of rainforest, royalty, and bronze. In the heart of what is now southern Nigeria lies the legacy of a kingdom whose artistic and technical mastery still defies explanation. A civilization that produced objects of such precision, beauty, and metallurgical sophistication that even modern experts were once reluctant to believe they could have come from pre-colonial Africa. These are the Benin bronzes, not coins, not crude castings, but intricate plaques, statues, and ceremonial objects crafted from brass, bronze, and copper alloys, created using methods that remain, in many ways, a mystery. The bronzes, despite their name, are not all bronze. Some are made of pure copper, others contain zinc, lead, or tin, but it is not just the materials that intrigue. It is the artistry, the realism, the flawless details, and the technique behind it all. How, in the 13th or 14th century, long before contact with Europe, did the artists of Benin develop and refine such complex metalworking? The city of Benin was once the capital of the powerful Edo Kingdom, a structured and urbanized civilization that flourished for centuries before being violently disrupted by British colonial conquest in 1897. It was during that punitive expedition that thousands of these bronzes were looted from the royal palace and scattered across European museums. But while much of the conversation today focuses on repatriation and ethics, a deeper mystery lingers. How were these objects created? The technique used is known as lost wax casting, an advanced process in which a detailed wax model is covered in clay or another mold material, then heated to melt and drain the wax, leaving a hollow shell into which molten metal is poured. Once the metal cools and the mold is broken away, what remains is a nearly perfect metal replica of the original wax design. Lost wax casting is not simple. It requires not only artistic skill, but also precise control of temperature, timing, and materials. Even slight variations can ruin the result. And yet, the Benin casters achieved extraordinary consistency. Facial expressions captured with lifelike nuance, geometric patterns etched into headdresses and robes, symbols, glyphs, and motifs, all rendered with microscopic fidelity. Some bronzes are so detailed they capture the texture of skin or the woven strands of coral bead necklaces. Did the Edo artisans develop this process independently, or were they building on older West African metallurgical traditions? There is evidence that nearby regions had engaged in iron and copper smelting centuries earlier. The Nok culture, for instance, was producing terracotta figures as early as 1000 BC, and ironworking flourished across sub-Saharan Africa long before it did in Europe. So perhaps the foundations were laid long ago, and Benin simply took it to its highest form. But that doesn't explain everything. Some scholars have argued that such metallurgical skill would require extensive knowledge of chemistry and heat control, implying a level of technological development not typically credited to African civilizations of the time. Others note that the bronzes exhibit artistic influences that seem to evolve in isolated brilliance, unaffected by Europe or the Islamic world. Yet a few early European observers, astonished by the bronze's quality, refused to believe they were made locally at all. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, colonial scholars and museum curators proposed theories that the bronzes were either imported, made by itinerant Arab artisans, or somehow copied from Portuguese models. But none of these theories hold under scrutiny. The styles, motifs, and materials are undeniably indigenous. The content of the bronzes, royal scenes, religious iconography, court rituals, reflects an internal cultural logic that outsiders would not have known. There is no sign of European technique in the casting itself. And the lost wax process used in Benin predates meaningful Portuguese contact. So what's left? Some suggest that the guilds of Benin, particularly the Igun Eranwan, or Royal Guild of Brass Casters, had access to generational knowledge passed down and guarded with ritual precision. Others believe that the bronzes served not only as art but as spiritual vessels, imbued with meaning and protected by belief. Their perfection may have been part of their function, not only to honor kings, but to immortalize them. If so, what does that say about our understanding of technology? Are we overlooking entire systems of knowledge, intertwined with religion, cosmology, and ancestry, because they do not fit into Western models of scientific progress? And what else might these bronzes reveal? Could we one day find the furnaces where they were cast? The molds, the wax forms, the tools? Could we learn more about how the casters controlled temperatures, mixed alloys, or coordinated such sophisticated production in a pre-industrial setting? Or is part of the magic that we can't? That these objects, beautiful and enduring, exist not just as products of technical mastery, but as echoes of something deeper, a civilization that knew how to blend science with symbolism, precision with prophecy. The Benin bronzes continue to awe not only for their form, but for what they represent, a legacy stolen but not silenced, a mystery cast not only in metal, but in memory. And as more are returned to their homeland, and more are studied, perhaps new questions will rise. Not just how they were made, but why. And what other ancient African innovations, lost, overlooked, or buried, are still waiting to be seen. As the story of the Benin bronzes fades into the mist of West Africa's royal legacy, we move eastward, across vast landscapes and ancient river valleys into the heartlands of Ethiopia. Here, where highlands rise like stone fortresses into the sky, and time clings like morning mist to the hills, we find one of the continent's most haunting enigmas, the stone stele of Tia. Set quietly in the garage zone of southern Ethiopia, the site doesn't shout its mystery. It whispers it, through rows of carved megaliths standing in solemn silence over the rolling grasslands. To the casual traveler, they might appear as weathered gravestones. But look closer, and you'll see strange engravings, swords, abstract symbols, geometric patterns, etched with care into their faces. Who carved these, and why? There are over 40 stelae at Tia, arranged in aligned rows, many of them marked with recurring motifs, particularly stylized swords whose meaning remains uncertain. These symbols are not mere decorations. They suggest identity, status, perhaps even a kind of ancestral code. Some scholars believe the stelae mark the burial sites of warriors or tribal elites, dating roughly to between the 10th and 15th centuries AD. But beyond that, silence. There are no written records, no inscriptions that name the dead, no legends that survived to tell us who these people were. And yet, the place feels full, with presence, with memory, with something unspoken. What society left this behind? Some theories link the site to the Sidama or Garage peoples, whose ancestors may have once held dominion over the region. Others propose that Tia is part of a much older and broader megalithic tradition that stretches across Ethiopia and into other parts of East Africa, connected to a forgotten cultural complex whose scope and meaning are still not fully understood. And then there are the stelae themselves, monolithic in form but deeply human in expression. One stone bears what seems to be a pair of eyes staring outward, carved just beneath a crown-like emblem. Another holds a sword, suspended diagonally like a ritual offering. Others are so worn that only ghostly outlines remain, as if the passage of time itself has tried to erase the messages carved into them. But time has not succeeded. In 1980, Tia was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its archaeological significance. Yet even now, the true purpose of the site eludes certainty. Excavations have unearthed skeletal remains beneath several of the stones, usually single individuals, often buried in fetal positions, facing east. Some were buried with iron tools, beads, and ceramics. But the cultural logic behind these burials, the cosmology, the beliefs, the rituals, remains frustratingly out of reach. Why swords? Were these symbols of valor? Were they ceremonial or practical? Were they tied to a warrior class, or perhaps to spiritual guardianship? And what of the geometric designs? Repeating chevrons, crosses, circles, do they point to a system of symbols? A lost language of stone? More intriguingly, Tia is not alone. Across Ethiopia, Kenya, and southern Eritrea, scattered remnants of similar stone pillars exist, some solitary, others clustered in groups, their alignment sometimes suggesting astronomical intent. Could Tia be a ceremonial hub in a broader network of sites? A spiritual center in a vanished constellation of beliefs? There are even whispers, though unproven, of deeper connections to the ancient South Arabian world, or to Nilotic cultures that traded along the Red Sea. Ethiopia, after all, has always been a crossroads between Africa, Arabia, and beyond. But without inscriptions, without oral traditions, how do we piece together a past that left only symbols? Perhaps that is the most profound mystery of Tia. It invites us to read a text written without words, a history carved in silence. Modern archaeology continues to probe the site with newer tools: ground-penetrating radar, isotopic analysis, radiocarbon dating. But some scholars warn that too much interpretation may project outside frameworks onto something that was deeply local, deeply rooted in the sacred practices of a forgotten people. What if these stones weren't meant to explain, but to preserve something sacred beyond words? To mark not just the dead, but the boundary between worlds? Tia stands today not just as a monument to those who came before, but as a question posed to the present, one that stirs a quiet awe in all who walk among the stones. And as we continue our exploration of Africa's ancient mysteries, we're left with a lingering thought. How many other sites like this lie undiscovered? How many voices wait, not to be heard, but to be remembered? Perhaps the stones still speak. We just haven't yet learned how to listen. From the somber stillness of Tia's ancestral stones, we journey northward, into the ancient highlands of northern Ethiopia. The landscape rises into a plateau of golden hills and eucalyptus groves, where the air grows thin and the silence feels older than memory. Here lies Aksum, the former heart of an empire, and a place where stone reaches for the heavens in forms both elegant and enigmatic. Among the cracked soil and weathered ruins stand the famed obelisks, monolithic stelae carved from single blocks of granite. Towering above the earth, some reaching over 70 feet in height, they mimic the outlines of multi-storied buildings, complete with false windows, symbolic doors, and tiers that resemble the floors of a palace. But these were not functional structures, they were symbols, markers of the dead, or perhaps guides to something beyond. How did a civilization that rose over 2,000 years ago, around the 1st century AD, achieve such engineering precision? What were these towering stones meant to signify? And perhaps most puzzling of all, why do they appear to follow principles of sacred geometry? The obelisk of Aksum, the most famous among them, once lay broken on the ground until its return from Rome in 2005. Restored and now standing tall once again, it looms like a silent sentinel over the surrounding ruins. Carved with flawless symmetry, its faces echo a geometry so exact it almost defies its age. The base is solid, the midsection narrow, and the top crowned with a curved half-moon cap, known as a false roof, likely intended to resemble a structure meant not for the living, but for the divine. And it is here that questions begin to emerge. Were these monuments aligned with celestial bodies? Some scholars suggest that the layout of the stellae field and the placement of specific obelisks may relate to solar or stellar positions, perhaps tracking solstices, equinoxes, or even marking a ritual calendar. Others point to the mathematical ratios encoded in their proportions. The consistent use of thirds and sevenths in the segmentation of the stelae, the symbolic repetition of architectural forms, doors, windows, levels, evoke a deeper logic, perhaps a cosmological one. Aksumite culture was steeped in spiritual duality, life and afterlife, seen and unseen. Could the geometry of these monoliths have been a language of transition, a visual hymn to immortality? Archaeological studies suggest that the obelisks served as funerary markers, erected over elaborate underground tombs reserved for Aksum's elite. Excavations beneath the stellae fields have revealed burial chambers lined with masonry, adorned with pottery, jewelry, and even gold. But unlike Egyptian pyramids, these obelisks contain no inscriptions, no clear identification of the dead they commemorate. Their silence is as intentional as their form, and so the mystery deepens. Where did this knowledge of stonework come from? Some historians link Aksum's architectural legacy to South Arabian influence, particularly the Sabaean kingdoms of modern-day Yemen. Trade routes across the Red Sea would have allowed for a diffusion of ideas, cultural, religious, and technological. But the Aksumites took these influences and transformed them into something wholly their own. There is no direct precedent for the scale or style of the Aksum obelisks elsewhere in Africa or Arabia. Could it be that the obelisks reflect a system of belief no longer known to us? A theology not recorded in books, but in form, height, angle, and shadow? Local legends say the stelae were raised by giants, or that they were carved by heavenly tools given to the Aksumite kings by divine messengers. While these myths aren't taken literally by scholars, they hint at something else, a sense of awe that even today lingers in the presence of these stones. Not fear, but reverence. What's equally striking is what still lies buried. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed that only a fraction of Aksum's ancient necropolis has been excavated. Beneath grassy mounds and crumbling earth may rest more tombs, more monuments, and perhaps more answers. And yet, perhaps it is the unanswered questions that make Aksum most powerful. What kind of cosmology would require a monument this tall to honor the dead? Why the effort to replicate buildings in stone that were never meant to be occupied? And why the geometric discipline, the near-perfect symmetry, the silence where writing should be? Could these monoliths have served as an interface between heaven and earth? Not just tomb markers, but instruments of ritual? Anchors for the soul? Or were they simply declarations of imperial power, frozen in stone? We do not know. But in the shadow of the stelae, as light shifts across their carved faces and outlines fall across the tombs of forgotten rulers, one is left with the unshakable feeling that these stones were more than monuments. They were messages. And as we continue this journey through Africa's ancient enigmas, we are left with a simple but profound question. What knowledge did the ancients possess that we have since forgotten? As we leave the towering obelisks of Aksum behind, shaped by chisel and cosmic alignment, we travel westward into the lush heart of Ghana. Here, the land opens into dense forest, and then suddenly, almost impossibly, a near-perfect circle of water appears. Still, deep, silent. This is Lake Bosamtwi. Cradled within the crater of an ancient impact, the lake is unlike any other in West Africa. Surrounded by green hills and thick with mist in the early morning hours, it sits as if untouched by time, neither river-fed nor drained. A closed basin, isolated and enigmatic. From above, Its circular shape hints at a cataclysmic origin. From the ground, it feels sacred. And to the Ashanti people who have lived here for centuries, it is. According to their tradition, Bosom Twi is no ordinary lake. It is a spiritual crossing point, a place where the souls of the dead come to say farewell before journeying to the afterlife. It is said that no one may enter its waters with iron. Only wooden boats, shaped like planks or carved logs, are permitted. To do otherwise would be to disturb the spirits beneath. But the lake's mystery runs deeper than myth. Scientific studies have confirmed that Bosom Twi was formed by a meteorite impact approximately 1.07 million years ago. The crater it left behind spans over 10.5 kilometers, now filled with water so deep and still that sediments have accumulated in uninterrupted layers for millennia. These layers have preserved a climate record more detailed than almost any other in tropical Africa, an untouched history of rainfall, droughts, and shifts in the environment going back hundreds of thousands of years. Yet the lake's origin, though now understood in geological terms, raises a question that blends the spiritual and the physical. How did ancient peoples come to associate this place with such profound metaphysical importance? Long before the tools of science named it a crater lake, the Ashanti already revered it as a cosmic threshold. Was it intuition? Was it the shape? Or was there a moment, a story lost to time, that rooted this lake in the sacred? Archaeological evidence reveals that communities have lived near Bosom Twi for over 1,000 years. Pottery fragments, burial sites, and tools have been found on its shores, but no evidence suggests large-scale settlement within the basin itself. It is as though the lake was always approached with caution, visited, venerated, but never truly tamed. And then there are the local legends. One tale tells of a hunter named Akora Bompe, who pursued a wounded antelope into the forest. The animal vanished into the lake's edge and disappeared. The hunter, stunned by the moment, recognized this place as holy, an entrance to another world. He named the lake Bosom Twi, meaning antelope god, and since then generations have spoken of it not just as water, but as memory made visible. Today, the lake is still encircled by villages, 27 in total, each with their own variations of the stories, but all unified in reverence. Ceremonies are held on its shores, offerings are made, and the water remains, by tradition, both sacred and untouchable by metal. But other mysteries linger. Beneath the lake's floor lies a rare type of glass-like rock known as impactite, formed by the pressure and heat of the meteorite's collision. Some scientists suggest the Bosom Twi impact may be linked to much larger cosmic events, possibly even connected to debris patterns that hint at more global-scale disruptions. Others wonder whether the impact may have affected early life or migration patterns in subtle but lasting ways. There are also whispers, speculative, rarely spoken in academic halls, about the alignment of ancient settlements around the lake, about unseen patterns that resemble lunar or solar configurations. Could the lake have been part of an ancient observation system? A natural calendar encoded into the landscape? No theory has yet been confirmed. The sediment cores extracted from Bosom Twi's floor continue to offer new data, windows into African climate history that could shape our understanding of not only the past but the future. But the spiritual silence of the lake, its role in Ashanti cosmology, and its untouched stillness remain harder to measure. Why does this place feel so watched? Why has it resisted transformation, modern infrastructure, or even simple economic exploitation? Perhaps because its mystery is still alive. As the mists lift from its surface in the early dawn, and the wooden boats of fishermen drift silently across the water, one cannot help but wonder, is this only a crater, born from stone and fire falling from the sky? Or is it, as generations have believed, something more? A mirror to the cosmos, a lake that remembers. As we drift away from the sacred silence of Lake Bosom Twi and its celestial reflections, we find ourselves crossing into one of Africa's least explored landscapes, a plateau veiled by savanna grasslands and dotted with low, rolling hills. Here, in the heart of the Central African Republic, near the quiet town of Bouar, lies a riddle carved in stone. Massive granite pillars, standing alone or clustered in careful formation, rise from the earth as though marking a forgotten boundary between the living and the dead. Some are worn and cracked by centuries of rain and sun, but others remain oddly upright, still defiant against the pull of time. Locals call them Tanzunu, the ancient stones. More than 70 sites spread across this plateau. Each one whispers of something purposeful, something sacred. These are not accidental scatterings of rock. The stones are arranged in circles, sometimes accompanied by rectangular slabs. Some appear to align with celestial points. Others form corridors that lead nowhere, or perhaps once led somewhere that no longer exists. But who built them, and why? Archaeological evidence suggests the megaliths of Bouar date back at least to 1000 BC, possibly earlier. Their construction has been attributed to an Iron Age culture known only through its scattered remnants, pottery shards, burial mounds, and stone tools. The megaliths themselves, however, are devoid of inscriptions, carvings, or any written explanation. Like silent sentinels, they guard their origins. The idea that these sites were burial grounds is widely accepted. Excavations have uncovered skeletal remains and funerary objects buried near the stones. But these findings only deepen the mystery. Why such immense effort to raise these granite pillars, some weighing several tons, for tombs in such an isolated region? What rituals once echoed through this forgotten necropolis? And how did an ancient civilization, with no evidence of advanced machinery, transport, and erect such massive stones? Here, speculation begins to creep in. Some researchers believe the builders used techniques similar to other megalithic cultures, levering, dragging, and lifting with coordinated manpower. But in a land with no large rivers nearby, no beasts of burden, and little evidence of urban development, the scale of labor required becomes difficult to reconcile with what we know of the region's ancient populations. Others point to the alignment of certain stone circles with solar and lunar events. Could the Tanzunu have served as astronomical markers, part of a calendrical system lost to time? Or were they places of communion, where priest-kings, shamans, or elders read the heavens and spoke with ancestors? There are even those, though few in academic circles, who propose more speculative links, similarities to structures in distant regions, echoes of Atlantean myths, or contact with travelers from unknown civilizations. Such ideas remain unproven, yet the stones, unmoved for centuries, do little to refute them. Their geometry, their persistence, and their silence invite interpretation. The surrounding landscape offers few additional clues. The Bouar region is remote, with sparse historical records and a long history of oral traditions, yet even local lore remains curiously quiet about the origins of the stones. Most stories begin after the structures were already in place, as though even the first storytellers found them ancient. This temporal gap between the living memory and the monumental past raises a haunting question. What happens when a culture disappears so completely that even its name is lost? In other parts of the world, megaliths have yielded their secrets gradually. In Stonehenge, alignments eventually mapped the solstices. In Nabta Playa, hidden beneath Saharan sands, the stones revealed astronomical knowledge millennia old. But Bouar remains largely unstudied, underfunded, and overlooked. Its potential to reshape our understanding of sub-Saharan prehistory waits in patient silence. What would a full excavation reveal? Could new dating techniques uncover a deeper timeline? Could satellite imaging reveal larger patterns across the landscape? suggesting trade, migration, or spiritual networks linking Buar to other mysterious sites across Africa? Or is the silence itself the message? In the shadow of these pillars, one feels the presence of something deliberately concealed, by nature, by time, or by design. The absence of inscriptions, the anonymity of the builders, and the enduring alignment of stone to sky all hint at a forgotten sophistication, a language of architecture that speaks not through words, but through permanence. What was once buried here? Who walked between these stones and looked up at the stars? And what compelled a people, long vanished, to carve their memory into the bones of the earth? Perhaps the answer lies still beneath the soil. Or perhaps, like so many ancient mysteries, it lingers in the spaces between fact and belief, in the quiet intervals where stone, spirit, and time become one. The desert breathes in silence. In the heart of the Sahara, where the sun casts long shadows over the dunes and stone, the air mountains rise like forgotten sentinels. Here, in northern Niger, near the ancient city of Agadez, the air is dry and clear, the earth scorched and hard. It is a landscape of wind-blown secrets, one that reveals little at first glance. Yet beneath this vast and lonely terrain, scattered across the rocky ground, lie the traces of a mystery that predates memory, the remains of some of Africa's oldest copper smelting operations. These are not the grand open pits of modern industry. They are quieter, more subtle, faint depressions in the ground, blackened fragments of slag, and the crumbled outlines of clay furnaces. But taken together, they tell a story of early human mastery over fire and metal in one of the least hospitable places on Earth. When French archaeologists first surveyed these sites in the 1970s, they were astonished. Deep in the Sahara, far from the copper-rich regions of Cyprus or Anatolia, there stood undeniable evidence of ancient metallurgy. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal found in the smelting debris suggested activity as early as 1500 BC, possibly earlier. This would place Agadez among the earliest known centers of copper production in sub-Saharan Africa. But who were the people who lived here? What drove them to mine and smelt copper in the middle of the desert? Little is known. These ancient metallurgists left behind no written records. Their tools were simple: stone hammers, crucibles, shallow shaft furnaces. And yet, what they achieved was anything but primitive. They developed the technical knowledge to reach the high temperatures needed to extract copper from ore, using bellows and charcoal to fan the fire. Their slag, now scattered across the desert like the ash of ancient forges, bears the telltale signs of complex smelting processes. Was this knowledge developed independently? Or did it travel across unseen trade routes from the Nile or the Levant? Scholars debate the origins of metallurgy in Africa, and Agadez remains a key part of that conversation. Some argue that the knowledge came from the north, carried by early trans-Saharan contact. Others believe it emerged locally, born of experimentation, necessity, and an intimate understanding of the land. The copper itself likely came from small surface deposits, greenish veins running through the rock. The ore was mined with basic tools, broken into smaller pieces and carried to makeshift smelting sites. There, through trial and error, early artisans learned to separate metal from stone. The result was not just copper, useful for tools and ornaments, but the forging of a deeper relationship between humans and the earth, between will and element, between knowledge and power. But the question remains, why here? Why in this remote desert, far from rivers or fertile fields, do we find such a sophisticated metallurgical tradition? One possibility lies in trade. Though dry and desolate now, the Sahara was once a corridor of exchange. For millennia, nomads, traders, and caravans crossed its dunes, linking West Africa with Egypt, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. Perhaps copper from Agadez fed into these ancient routes, traded for salt, gold, or even ideas. Another theory speaks to symbolism. In many African traditions, metals are not just materials, they are sacred. Copper, with its reddish glow and malleability, was often associated with life, fertility, and transformation. Its use may have been as much spiritual as practical. Could it be that the smelters of Agadez were not merely artisans but ritual specialists, keepers of a sacred flame? Yet even these ideas fail to fully explain the scale and isolation of the operations. The furnaces are scattered across the mountains, often located far from water sources. No major settlements have been found nearby. This has led some to speculate that the copper mines were seasonal or ceremonial sites, visited only during certain times of the year or for specific rituals. Others go further. Some fringe theorists, pointing to the early dates and geographic isolation, suggest that Agadez represents a forgotten chapter of technological innovation, a center of lost knowledge now buried under sand. They ask, could there have been an earlier civilization here, one whose influence stretched farther than we understand? Mainstream archaeology does not support these more speculative claims, yet the mystery remains. The people who worked these mines are gone. Their homes, their languages, their names, all lost to time. What they left behind are fragments, bits of copper slag, broken furnaces, tools of stone and clay, and questions. What happened to these ancient metallurgists? Did they move on when the copper ran out? Were they absorbed into later cultures, such as the legendary Tuareg of the Sahara? Or did drought and desertification simply erase them from the map? Today, the ruins of the copper mines lie largely unvisited. Few travelers venture this far. And yet, if you stand in the silence of the Air Mountains and listen to the wind rushing through the valleys, you can almost hear the faint clang of hammer on ore, the hiss of flame, the breath of a bellows. It is a whisper from a world long vanished. And so, the question lingers. What else lies hidden beneath the desert sands? What other stories of invention, of mastery, of mystery have yet to be unearthed? The copper of Agadez still glows in the soil, and its secrets, like the metal itself, wait patiently to be uncovered. As the desert wind dances over the dunes of northern Mali, it carries with it grains of Saharan dust and whispers of a forgotten legacy. At the edge of this ocean of sand, where the Niger River bends like a ribbon of life through the Sahel, lies the ancient city of Timbuktu. Once a vibrant center of trade, faith, and learning, Timbuktu now rests in silence beneath a fading sun. But beneath this silence lies something profound. Pages, libraries, and secrets left by a civilization whose thirst for knowledge rivaled any in the medieval world. The name Timbuktu conjures images of distance and remoteness, but once it was a beacon. During the 13th to 16th centuries, it flourished under the Mali and Songhai empires, serving as a major intellectual and spiritual capital. Pilgrims and scholars came from across the Islamic world, North Africa, Egypt, Andalusia, to debate, translate, and study. They gathered beneath mud-brick mosques, in shaded courtyards, exchanging ideas under the scorching Malian sun. At the heart of this intellectual ferment were the libraries. Thousands of manuscripts, handwritten in flowing Arabic script and African Ajami, filled the wooden shelves and scroll rooms of private homes and learning centers. Subjects ranged from astronomy to theology, law to medicine, poetry to philosophy. Some were Islamic texts, copied with meticulous care. Others were local compositions, original treatises written by African scholars in the heart of the Sahara. Many were centuries old even then. But today, most of those libraries are gone. Some were destroyed, others were hidden, and some, perhaps, still lie buried under the sands or sealed within walls of crumbling homes. What happened to Timbuktu's vast treasury of knowledge? How could one of Africa's greatest intellectual legacies be so easily forgotten by history? We begin with what is known. The Ahmed Baba Institute, named after a famous 16th century Timbuktu scholar, remains one of the few visible remnants of this scholarly tradition. It houses thousands of manuscripts recovered over the years, some preserved in tin boxes, others rescued from fire, flood, or war. They are written on sheepskin, paper, and palm leaves, some bound in leather, others wrapped in rags. Their contents are breathtaking, not just Quranic commentaries, but texts on advanced mathematics, moral philosophy, pharmacology, geography. Some maps hint at lands far beyond the Sahara, others speculate on the structure of the universe. Many remain untranslated, but for every manuscript preserved, many more are believed to have been lost. In 2012, when armed militants overran Timbuktu, many feared that the libraries would be destroyed in the name of ideological purity. But something extraordinary happened. Local families, who for generations had guarded manuscripts in their homes, smuggled them out. Hidden in sacks of rice, buried beneath the floorboards, carried by night on donkey carts, these manuscripts were quietly evacuated, saved from fire and fanaticism by those who knew their worth. Still, not all could be saved. Hundreds were burned. Some simply disappeared. And deeper questions remain. What secrets lie in the manuscripts that have not yet been opened? Some scholars believe there may be mathematical theories or historical records that could rewrite what we know about pre-colonial Africa. Others speak of encoded mystical texts, esoteric diagrams, or correspondences between African scholars and thinkers in Cairo, Fez, even Persia. There are tantalizing fragments, references to lost cities, astronomical instruments, arcane systems of healing. Did Timbuktu scholars know something that has been forgotten? We often associate medieval scholarship with the libraries of Alexandria or Baghdad. But Timbuktu, remote and sun-bleached, rivaled them in ambition. At its peak, some reports suggest the city housed over 700,000 manuscripts, more than many European centers at the time. Manuscripts were so valuable they were used as currency, passed down as family heirlooms, locked in vaults not of gold, but of ink. And yet, many remain unread. Why? Partly due to language. The Arabic script conceals a variety of tongues, Arabic itself, but also local languages such as Songhai, Tamashek, and Fulani, written in a Ajami script. Translating them requires rare expertise. Partly, it is due to preservation. The desert is harsh. Manuscripts crumble, rot, vanish. But partly, perhaps, it is because we no longer expect to find knowledge in places the West long considered marginal. Could it be that the ideas buried in Timbuktu's manuscripts challenge the conventional timeline of human knowledge? Could they contain references to other centers of African learning now lost, or forgotten technologies, or unseen spiritual traditions? Some fringe theorists suggest the manuscripts contain astronomical knowledge too advanced for their time, charts that reflect star positions with uncanny accuracy, or treatises on planetary movement centuries before Galileo. Others wonder if the manuscripts hold encoded references to ancient migration routes, or even to pre-Islamic African civilizations that have yet to be identified. Of course, most of these claims remain unproven. But the manuscripts themselves, silent, dusty, and fading, continue to speak. They speak of a time when Africa was not only the cradle of civilization, but also a custodian of reason. They speak of a city whose heartbeat was not wealth or conquest, but learning. They speak of men and women who believed that writing was a sacred act, that knowledge was worth protecting even in the face of fire. Today, in hidden archives and temperature-controlled vaults in Mali and beyond, Timbuktu's manuscripts wait. Some are being digitized, studied, translated. Others remain sealed, untouched, their secrets still wrapped in linen and leather. And so we are left to wonder, what remains unread? What wisdom has been lost to sand, to time, to war? What ancient questions do the writings of Timbuktu still whisper, softly, patiently, beneath layers of dust? In a world quick to forget, perhaps it is the forgotten libraries that still remember.